You know, every time I find Doug Walker has talked about a movie I really like, there's this small part of me that just hopes he'll actually do a halfway decent review of it, and he never does. It's actually incredible. Doug did a review of the South Park movie, and wow, it actually took me aback how bad of a video this was. So you guys remember in Mr. Enter's Little Clowns of Happy Town review where he'd do this back and forth with YouTube calling his video not advertiser friendly?
Well, it's time to review Animal Crossing the movie. Oh yeah, I forgot, Japan doesn't have any fair use laws, and on the internet if you want to actually do anything, you need to bend over to corporate interests 100% of the time and let them fuck you any way they want. Let's try that Alice in Wonderland thing. I'm sure that'll take off. Is that really fair? I mean, just because what I'm talking about has disturbing or graphic imagery doesn't mean that I personally am going to be making disturbing or graphic imagery. Should you really blame me for talking about it? Okay. Let's try Mulan 2. How about Barnyard? That's been on the plate for quite a while, and I'm living in South Park, I swear. Okay, how about
2 hours later.
Alright, I got one more. Inspongiac. How is it I'm a fucking insomniac?
Okay, so imagine not that entire bit, but just this one very specific part of that bit.
And like all villains that look like Dick Dastardly, but it's the actual name of an actual character that actually existed. I'm not talking about an actual dick. Okay. We'll play it your way. Like all villains that look like Richard Dastardly.
And then imagine it done constantly throughout the review, even in ways that don't make any sense. If you don't understand what that would look like, well, I'll just let Doug explain it to you.
On that note, while this film managed to challenge censorship in the theatrical world, YouTube is much less forgiving if even one F-bomb is dropped. So, we'll have our cute kitty Chaplin saying words with the exact same meaning, but technically aren't swears. So advertisers can rest assured people who don't want to deal with the real world don't have to.
Which, first off, yeah, obviously a website that's minimum age of use is 13 is going to require more restrictions than a film which has the R rating, given R is for 17 and up. But yes, this is one of the main jokes throughout the review. Every time Doug shows a clip that has swearing in it, he replaces the swear words with his cat saying a euphemism of them.
Fornicating. Roller in the hay. Rooster. Gluteus Maximus. Proprietor of tail. She-poodle. Lassie. Canine of the feminine breed. Intimate relations. Stool. Member. Posterior. Globes. Pocket rocket. Hound dog of the fair sex. Muff. This kind. Front bottom. Downstairs. Rectum.
There's more of this, by the way. I'm just showing you a sample, and it wouldn't even bother me so much, but Doug really doesn't do anything with it. The most we get to an actual payoff is this at the very end.
Bitch.
Which is just fucking lame given how long the joke had been going on. The payoff is so small, you just focus on how annoying the buildup was, and how little was done with it throughout the video. Not helped by the fact that some of these replacements don't make any sense.
Whoopee. Not.
The word you used to replace fuck was a euphemism for sex, and don't get me wrong, the word fuck is used to replace sex in a lot of conversation, but it's far from its only use. What you just essentially had Cartman say was, why the sex not? Which is not something most people would say. Oh, but don't worry, that's not the only method of censorship Doug uses. He also plays Seinfeld clips.
Chef, how do you make a woman like you more than any other guy?
Oh, that's easy. You just gotta find the...
I think I can say this one. I'm not sure with YouTube. Oh, I'll just play this.
Dolores!
You guys, do you know where I can find the...
Dolores!
This one cumulates with Doug just placing the head of the woman who played Dolores on Seinfeld over a giant clitoris at the end of the movie.
So Stan finds the...
Dolores!
Tell me how to get Wendy to like me.
Dude, you just have to have confidence in yourself.
And at some point, you just have to ask, if Doug has to go through all this shit to review the movie, then what the fuck is the point of even reviewing it? Especially given how Doug, immediately after this bit, lampshades how pointless of an exercise this is.
Chicks love confidence.
I'm confident no matter what I do, this is still gonna get me age restricted.
Then what the fuck was the point of doing any of this? You essentially just told the audience that you did all of it for no reason. Anyway, here's Doug bitching about cancel culture or something.
This, of course, is a satire about rage culture, claiming media is destroying the sensitive minds of the country, and censorship is the only answer, never realizing their outrage might be doing more harm than good. This is, no surprise, still practiced today, as it ping-pongs in between political extremes.
I love how Doug uses this comic, which lambasted the hypocrisy of not allowing Pepe Le Pew in children's cartoons while also allowing Andrew Cuomo to be governor of New York, despite engaging in sexual harassment. When the sexual harassment allegations were one of the main reasons Cuomo resigned as governor in 2021. Doug, your comic is incredibly outdated.
Yeah, remember boycott is totally different.
Doug, this one appears to be entirely in jest. Actually, looking at the examples the article gives, you find things like somebody doing an all dogs go to heaven edit, and somebody tweeting euthanize the police dogs. Nothing in this article gives me the impression this was serious. And I just want to note how Doug wanted to take a few minutes to talk about how big of a problem this is, and yet one of the examples he gives, again, just appears to be a meme.
From cancel. That's something only the other side does, not us.
I can't believe Martin Luther King Jr. tried to cancel the Montgomery bus system, shaking my head. What the fuck are you going on about, Doug? I think what I find the most notable about that clip is the Target boycott and the Hogwarts Legacy boycott weren't even people trying to actually get rid of something. They were just people choosing to not spend their money on something because of their own ideological reasons. How dare they? And mind you, I thought the Target boycott was over reasons that were fucking stupid, although I won't be going into that here because it's not all that relevant. However, I'm not dishonest, so I'm not going to sit here and pretend like not giving your money to a corporation is the same thing as attempting to prohibit its existence. Nor am I going to sit here and pressure those who disagree with me into ending their boycott, because if they don't, they might become one of those spooky, scary cancelers. Oh, and immediately after that, we get this absolutely baffling line from Doug.
Please welcome Terrence and Philip.
A bunch of parents show up to cancel Terrence and Philip. Boycott, sorry, just again, so different.
The parents didn't go to Conan's taping to boycott Terrence and Philip. That doesn't even make any fucking sense. They went there to arrest them so they could be put on trial and eventually executed. Also, I'd be lying if I said I didn't find it a tad distasteful to compare your average consumer boycott, again, regardless of how ridiculous I find the reason to be, to arresting two entertainers, attempting to execute them, and declaring war on the country they're from because they said profanities in a movie. Although, that could just be a me thing. I disagree with you, but I'm pretty sure you're not Hitler and all that. That wasn't even the only long speech Doug gave about these topics in this review, by the way. Here's another one.
Will I, for one, give credit that Cartman is exfoliating his skin with a beauty mask while singing this number? However, if this was to be taken any other way, I, for one, would be offended by this cartoon that constantly declares it's trying to offend me. Because just like Tropic Thunder and Always Sunny in Philadelphia, all these characters are smart, kind, level-headed role models that are clearly saying we need to be exactly like. If that wasn't the case and these were stupid, ignorant morons, hell, even satirizing stupid, ignorant morons, dare I say, there could be comedy involved. But that's not it. There's a beauty mask, so there's no problem.
I'm not going to sit here and pretend like people like this don't exist. In fact, I covered one a few months back. However, the fact that Doug just doesn't give any examples of who the fuck he's even talking about, put together with the fact that this completely distracts from the review, honestly makes this whole tangent feel incredibly pointless. Anyway, here are some more examples of Doug just not understanding the movie.
The school tries to sing to the kids how to say other words despite them meaning the exact same thing.
No? Well, okay, half yes, half no. They are told to say poo instead of shit.
Step 2, instead of shit, say poo, as in bull poo poo, head in his poo is cold.
And buns instead of ass.
Step 1, instead of ass, say buns, like kiss my buns or you're a bun's hole.
However, instead of bitch, they're told to say a word that means generosity.
Step 3, with bitch, drop the T, cause bic is Latin for generosity.
Which it actually isn't, by the way, just fun fact. Which is not what bitch means normally, at least in my experience. And they're just told not to say fuck.
Step 4, don't say fuck anymore, cause fuck is the worst word that you can say. So just use the word okay.
They even repeat that like 3 times.
Step 4, don't say fuck anymore, cause fuck is the worst word that you can say.
Fuck is the worst word that you can say. We shouldn't say fuck, no, we shouldn't say fuck, no.
You're good, you can go.
A moment of gratification for years of me saying, that's James Hetfield singing that, and everybody saying, no it is, and it be in the credits. Well, he is now,
Lady dogs.
Doug, this should go without saying, but credits and wiki pages aren't the same thing.
As you might have expected though, Kyle's mom hears the song and forces Cartman to get a V-chip in his brain. This is a parody of the V-chip that was made to block shows like South Park from being seen by children, but despite so many groups complaining something like this needs to exist, very few parents actually purchased it. Proving again it was much more about complaining than actually solving the problem.
Okay, the Kaiser Foundation looked into this in 2004, and Doug is once again just full of shit. Specifically, they say its low usage was primarily because 1 in 4 parents hadn't bought a TV since it was required to be in them, with another 4 in 10 not apparently even realizing their TV had it. When controlled for these factors, the amount of parents that used it jumped from 15% to 42%.
We used to talk all night long until the sun came up.
Well, yeah, because I was still waiting to get you in bed, dummy.
Okay, so here's kind of a confession I have about this movie. It's always around this point that I remember it. I love talking about this film. I look back on it fondly. I remember the commentaries, songs, and a fair amount of laughs. But I also have to admit, it can get a little boring. And I don't think it's a coincidence that it's around the half-hour mark where I start to think that, because South Park is a half-hour show.
Okay, first off, South Park is actually a 22-minute show, not a half-hour show. It only has a half-hour block because of commercials, but that might just be me nitpicking. Secondly, the part you showed was from 40 minutes in, and that can be more blamed on the film slowing down the second act, as most films do, in order to properly set things up for the climax. You tying it into South Park being a half-hour show just doesn't make any sense.
But there are long stretches where the jokes are a little weak, or include scenes that don't even end on a joke. The Brian Boitano song ends on a freeze frame. There's nothing really that funny about that. This scene ends with them naming the group.
The password is La Resistance.
That never got a laugh when I saw it in the theater.
But the entire joke of the Brian Boitano song was the rest of the fucking scene. Specifically how they consistently were making someone as random as Brian Boitano into such a mematic badass in such utterly absurd ways.
When Brian Boitano was in the Alps fighting grizzly bears, he used his magical fire breath and saved the maidens there. When Brian Boitano dropped through time to the year 3010, he fought the evil robot king and saved the human race again. And when Brian Boitano built the pyramids, he beat up Kublai Khan, cause Brian Boitano doesn't take shit from anybody.
Meanwhile, the big joke in the computer scene was the kids finding a pornographic video of Cartman's mom engaging in something scatological.
Du hast Scheiße gang.
Dude, it's a lady getting pooed on. Whoa, is it Cartman's mom? Oh, very funny. Hey, it is Cartman's mom.
On that note, Operation Human Shield puts all the black soldiers in the front to be shot first, but they move out of the way, letting the others get nuked.
You some people gonna die?
Wait. Are you insinuating that Jar Jar is the same actor as that guy? Oh my god, I'm amazed!
I don't get this in the slightest. Is the joke that he was voiced by the same guy who played Jar Jar Ahmed Best? Because he wasn't. I could find nothing to back this up. Is the joke the two just sound alike? If so, then why bring the actor who played Jar Jar up in the first place? I'm so confused. So final thoughts, I guess Doug Walker is a victim of cancel culture or something. Good night and good luck. Tonight's commentary is on the Nostalgia Critic, specifically his review of The Simpsons movie. A movie that, although he didn't bash by any stretch of the imagination, he did do a disservice to through, well, getting things wrong about. Now, full disclosure, I'm in the group of people Doug has never met in that I absolutely love this movie.
Okay, so I've never met anyone who hated this movie, but I've also never met anyone who loved it either.
However, that's not why I decided to cover this video. I decided to do such because Doug says things in it which I am going to debunk. For example, while talking about the background of the movie, Doug states,
with that said, people argue its peak was roughly 1990 to 1995, and The Simpsons movie wasn't even talked about seriously until 1997.
So, I'll just ignore the fact that you implied that You Only Move Twice, Hurricane Nettie, The Itchy and Scratchy and Poochie Show, Homer's Phobia, Brother from Another Series, Homer versus the 18th Amendment, and Homer's Enemy are not part of the peak of The Simpsons? The last of which you put on your top 11 Simpsons episodes list, by the way.
Number 9. Homer's Enemy. This is easily one of the darkest episodes The Simpsons have put out. And I'm not gonna lie, that's what makes it so enjoyable.
And that's just limiting it to season 8. And instead, I'll point out, that's just wrong. There have been attempts to turn The Simpsons into a movie for, best as I can tell, since it first came to air. An Entertainment Weekly article from 1991 specifically mentions Matt Groening's attempts to turn The Simpsons into a feature film. For example, Doug might be referencing that 20th Century Fox greenlit the film in 1997. However, that's a far cry from it first being seriously discussed, which is what was, actually said. Doug continues his confusing understanding of pre-production in the actual review, where he says things like,
I don't know, do you see any hints this movie started development in the 90s, Green Day?
Okay, a number of things are wrong with that statement. Among them, that Green Day's best-known song was American Idiot, which came out in 2004, which is very notable, and I did double-check this, guys, for not being a year in the 1990s. Also, although the film was greenlit in 1997, they didn't start working on the script for it until 2001. So again, I have to sit here confused as to how a Green Day cameo in the final film equals it began development in the 90s, obviously. And yes, I know it's a joke, but the joke doesn't make any fucking sense. And he does this joke again immediately afterwards, by the way.
Gentlemen, it's been an honor playing with you tonight.
Ooh, and a Titanic reference. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, that made me laugh pretty hard.
Yes, it sure is good that this film started development before December 31st, 1999, because otherwise they wouldn't have been able to reference the, at the time, highest grossing movie of all time. What? Actually watching the movie shows a much greater focus on referencing things in the 2000s as opposed to the 90s. To quote from TV Tropes, the movie is an unintentional period piece. The references to Happy Feet and Inconvenient Truth, Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader, Harry Potter, Green Day performing the theme song at the beginning, and a joke about President Schwarzenegger, all of which date the movie in the mid to late 2000s. In general, I don't think Doug knows all that much about the 2000s, despite living through it. There's one part where he says,
This is brought to the head of the EPA, Russ Cargill, played by Albert Brooks, who brings us up to President Schwarzenegger. Back when that was the funniest person we could imagine being president.
But that really wasn't all that absurd of a notion when this film came out. This wasn't Doc Brown being told in 1955 that Reagan, the actor, is going to be president in 1985.
I'm telling the truth, Doc. You gotta believe me.
Then tell me, future boy, who's president of the United States in 1985?
Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan? The actor? Then who's vice president? Jerry Lewis?
I suppose Jane Wyman is the first lady.
Whoa, wait, Doc!
And Jack Benny is Secretary of the Treasury.
Doc, you gotta listen to me.
Never has there been a more exciting time to be alive. A time of rousing wonder and heroic achievement. As they said in the film Back to the Future, where we're going, we don't need roads.
By this point, Schwarzenegger had been governor of California since 2003, and there was even serious talk about amending the Constitution so people not born in the US could serve as president, specifically so he could run for president in 2008. I know this may seem like a weird thing to get so consistently irked at, however, the just lack of understanding of the relevant culture around this movie consistently makes it seem like Doug doesn't even understand the film he's critiquing, given satire of relevant political and cultural events is a key cornerstone of The Simpsons. In the same regard, there's this weird bit after Bart skates through the neighborhood naked where Doug says,
"Yeah, this film does try to earn its PG-13 by going a little edgier on the jokes, which is a touch out of character, but again, it's a movie. I want to see what they can't do on TV. No matter how a little uncomfortable it might be by today's standards."
Ah yes, I remember the olden days of 2007 where kids could just skateboard naked down the street and then get handcuffed to a pole and nobody batted an eye. What? Here's an equally stupid bit about the film having edgy humor from slightly later in the review.
The police use a robot to try and defuse the bomb, resulting in another great edgy joke.
Talking about it, but I didn't take him seriously.
But maybe I just like it because I don't know if that joke's allowed on YouTube anymore.
You put this joke in a video that you then uploaded onto YouTube. It is a very safe assumption this joke is allowed on YouTube then. And Doug's understanding of the film itself also has some flaws. For example, when he talks about the scene early on of Abe seeing a vision from God, which just so happens to be the plot of the movie, he says the following.
Grandpa suddenly starts talking crazy, predicting the end of the world, leading to this pretty funny line.
Do something!
This book doesn't have any answers!
Or a reason why he's doing any of this. Yeah, they never do explain why Grandpa has this vision that accurately predicts the future. Though I guess Simpsons never will reveal how they can always tell what's gonna happen.
No, it was explained how Grandpa was able to predict the future in that scene, which began with Reverend Lovejoy declaring,
"Now today I'd like to try something a little different. I'm going to call on one of you." Now the word of God dwells within everyone. I want you to let that word out.
Doug doesn't even mention this part, by the way, instead choosing to introduce the scene with Flanders' announcement for some reason.
The kind of story kinda starts when the Simpsons go to church and Flanders has an announcement.
Even though the thing with Flanders is not only entirely dependent on what Reverend Lovejoy was saying, but also is just a joke that doesn't actually have any relevance to the story whatsoever. Before Grandpa starts his rantings, we also see a light shine on him coming from what looks like the back of the church.
Let the Lord's light shine upon you. Feel the Spirit. Let it out.
Horrible things are going to happen!
Given seeing the light is a common metaphor used to describe somebody who had, say, a spiritual experience or understands the word of their deity, it should be obvious the film is implying this information came from God. In case you're wondering, Doug's big complaint about this part of the movie is it's too much like the show, I guess?
Like I said, the first third of this movie works more like random jokes from the show than a cinematic narrative. Like, I totally forgot Lisa had a subplot with an Irish boyfriend in this, because he just seems like an excuse to work in some more random laughs.
Okay, first off, oh no, a comedy attempted to work in random laughs? God forbid. After he gives Abe Simpson a vision of the future that Doug will just pretend was never explained, of course. But second off, what do you mean by cinematic narrative in this context? The first third of the movie is a setup to the rest of it, where it explains what's going on and introduces its setting. Obviously, it's going to have to do so in a somewhat mundane fashion in order to properly build on what's been introduced in the rest of the film. You specifically note the scene where the house is destroyed as the first time the film felt cinematic.
The house sinks into the hole, which is actually some pretty sweet animation. Things really start to look and feel cinematic around this point.
But how exactly would a film start at this level? What would you recommend it do instead? You don't explain the slightest, you just kind of throw statements like this out there and pretend they're self-explanatory, which, for those who don't know, is one of the worst things in my mind a reviewer can do. Oh, and also, maybe this criticism would make more sense if, when the film actually does attempt to look cinematic early on, such as during the intro sequence, you didn't bash it through saying, it looks thrown together at the last minute without any explanation again.
It seems thrown together last minute. Like, even these backgrounds flying by look a little cheaply animated.
And I'm not even saying that Doug is wrong. Maybe actually those do just objectively look cheaply animated and I didn't notice. But the lack of any elaboration just makes this point consistently confusing, to say the very least. Mostly because when I think cheaply animated, I don't think a fairly fast-paced shot where, at worst, it just looks kind of flat. Speaking of things Doug doesn't like the animation of without any fucking reasoning given, there are two parts of this review where Doug talks about how the trees in the background of a shot are badly rendered, I think?
Maybe he was referring to the trees looking like Papa Rappa the Rapper. Guys, it's 2007. They take the villain out, Homer and Marge ride through another batch of poorly rendered trees, and
to which my reply is, what exactly is poorly rendered or looks bad about them? They look like three-dimensional trees in a two-dimensional film that are in the first shot remaining stationary while the Simpsons are in a moving vehicle. They look completely fine. Again, I'm not saying it's impossible, I'm missing something. I'm just saying this review did not help me find the thing Doug apparently thinks I'm missing. Anything else regarding animation that Doug just doesn't understand?
And one where they find a way through the sandbox and Homer gives them all the middle finger. Which I'm not sure how you do if you only have 4 fingers, but still pretty funny.
Probably like this, like Homer is doing in the scene you just fucking played, Doug? Which you specifically called him giving them the middle finger? You are saying you don't know how you do something you just saw happen! Anyway, here's Doug not understanding the basics of drawing itself.
They do the missile shot that misled a lot of people in the trailer, which, okay, I know Simpsons is cartoony, but one missile is literally the size of Georgia. It's not that cartoony.
Okay, 2 things. 1, this isn't The Simpsons, this is Itchy and Scratchy, and yes, there is a difference. Given Itchy and Scratchy is far more cartoony than The Simpsons, and as such can get away with doing things that The Simpsons cannot. I mean, it would be rather jarring if this all happened to Bart and Lisa, wouldn't it?
Now you be a good, Pinocchio, and don't you lie.
I promise I will never hurt you.
Ouch!
Yes, that last clip is from the Simpsons movie, just a couple of seconds after the shot that Doug is playing. 2, that missile isn't actually the size of Georgia. We're just looking at it from a perspective where the missile is closer than the US, making the missile appear much larger than it actually is in comparison. Doug, when you look at this frame in the next scene, do you think, wow, how is Homer as tall as the film screen? Obviously not, because you understand he only looks so tall because of perspective. Going back to the comedy, there are 2 parts where Doug criticizes the editing, and neither of them make any sense whatsoever. Here is the first one.
Another slight issue is the pacing, which admittedly is tricky for writing like this. It wants to capture the comedy of the show, but still move at a cinematic speed. So sometimes the jokes will be one after another, not allowing any character moments to sink in.
You didn't bring my pants.
Who am I, Tommy Bahama?
This is the worst day of my life.
The worst day of your life so far.
Or it'll just hold on a joke randomly.
You smiled, I'm off the hook.
Okay, first off, what the fuck is a cinematic pace? Again, it feels like you're just saying terms that don't really mean anything as opposed to making a point. Second off, there were character moments in that Homer scene. First, it shows him forgetting to bring Bart pants, making it clear that he's stupid, and then it shows him attempting to cheer Bart up by calling this the worst day of your life so far. An obvious attempt to reassure him, but one that does not work because Homer, again, is not all that bright, despite him trying his hardest to be a good dad. As seen as him saying it like he does, as if he is actually promising Bart something that will make him feel better, because he understands that is what you are supposed to do in a situation like this. Lastly, the reason why it held on Marge's blank stare in the scene that you just played was because that was the joke. It was her looking like that in response to what Homer was doing. Here's the other part where Doug criticizes the editing.
We're trapped like rats?
No, rats can't be trapped this easily. You're trapped like carrots.
Right? You feel it too, like one editor picked the most random moments to hold on.
But the joke is Lenny, Carl, and Moe looking at each other and nodding in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. It was holding on that because that was the only way the joke could be shown. Did Doug just not notice that? There's also just this weird selective praise when it comes to certain aspects of the film. For example, Doug praises the motorcycle bit because it comes back at the end of the movie.
On that note, though, the jokes are worked in a little better from here on out. They can win a truck at a carnival if Homer can ride a motorcycle inside a cage. I legit remember this joke because it comes back later when he rides it around the dome. It may seem like a subtle thing, but touches like this help you make connections and remember the experience more. It doesn't just feel random.
However, as I've already shown you, he dismissed the worst day of your life so far line as nothing more than a random joke with no character moment in it. Even saying in that clip the jokes are worked in better from here on out, implying they weren't worked in particularly well beforehand. However, that line also came back at the end, when Homer and Marge are on a motorcycle and this interaction occurs.
Best kiss of my life.
Best kiss of your life so far.
And it just feels weird the moment setting that up is dismissed earlier in the review, given Doug praises a similar aspect of the film later. Anyway, here's some miscellaneous issues.
Actually an Itchy and Scratchy cartoon, and for all the spin-offs and crossovers we've had over the years, why hasn't Itchy and Scratchy gotten a show/movie of their own? Oh wait, they've kind of had a ton, haven't they?
Okay, 2 things. 1, we haven't really had all that many Simpsons spin-offs, so I just don't know what you're talking about there. Second off, what the fuck am I looking at here? I'll grant you Happy Tree Friends and maybe Ren and Stimpy have similarities to Itchy and Scratchy, but what exactly do Invader Zim and Courage the Cowardly Dog, which you show 2 separate pictures of for some reason, have in common? Again, this isn't even something I'm going to say for sure is incorrect, but it's treated as if it's just obvious when no, it's not.
Because for all these faults, there are still amazing laughs that cracked me up for reasons that are honestly hard to explain. Like, why does them idiot-proofing the lake from being polluted more crack me up when they ask this idiot to dump something in it?
You know that character has a name, right? He's Cletus the slack-jawed yokel? There's even a song about him!
Some folk will never eat a skunk, but then again some folk will, like Cletus the slack-jawed yokel. Most folk will never lose a toe, and then again some folk will, like Cletus the slack-jawed yokel.
This is where the film starts to get going. Most folks don't even remember what happens in this until the dome pops up.
Later on in this review, Doug lists 3 things people always say they remember about the film, and one of them is Spider-Pig.
Whenever this movie's brought up, there's always 3 things that people remember. Spider-Pig, the dome, and this scene.
Which not only happened before the dome, but you yourself said wasn't important to the movie after the first half hour.
This does lead into a subplot where Bart starts to prefer Flanders as a father because Homer is always absent and reckless. But has to fight for space for the subplot that deserves even more attention. Homer gets a pig! The story is essential to the first 30 minutes and then never returns in the rest of the movie.
Anyway, that's all I want to cover, so final thoughts. I don't think the Nostalgia Critic can do whatever a Spider-Pig does. Good night and good luck. So ContraPoints' newest video is one of the most frustrating and nonsensical things I have seen in a long fucking time. Wow, sorry, that just kind of slipped out. But yes, I did not like ContraPoints' newest video. And the weird thing is, it's not even like there are a large amount of factual inaccuracies in it. It's just primarily 2 specific sections that make the whole thing a frustrating experience. Although, maybe I'm being too harsh. After all, this video did see Contra solving transphobia through blocking J.K. Rowling on Twitter.
As for what to do about J.K. Rowling, honestly, let's all just block her. Open up Twitter right now, go to her profile, and just block her.
Honestly, when I first heard that, the only thing I could think of is...
cyberbullying isn't real, just turn off the fucking monitor.
Now, I could sit here and point out how central Rowling is of a figure in the modern transphobia movement. However, according to Contra, that's actually not the case. She's merely the devil of the movement against transphobia because of misogyny or something.
A movement can't get along without a devil. And across the whole political spectrum, there's a misogynistic tendency to choose a female devil. Whether it's Anita Bryant, Hillary Clinton, Marie Antoinette, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or J.K. Rowling.
I should note, by the way, I find it really fucking interesting that she essentially said the reason Anita Bryant was made a devil was because of misogyny, when within the first 10 minutes of this fucking video, she directly says that Bryant's homophobic campaigning directly resulted in other homophobic initiatives, both in her home state of Florida and nationwide.
And meanwhile, Anita's campaign inspired more anti-gay legislation, including bans on gay adoption and same-sex marriage, both of which passed in the Florida Senate, as well as the failed Briggs Initiative in California, which would have forced public schools to fire gay teachers. So Anita Bryant was worse than a bigot. She was an influential bigot.
But on the topic of misogyny, let's talk about the part about Vosh. The thing that by far caused the most online drama in this video.
I've always been happy to acknowledge that angry trans people on Twitter sometimes take things too far. Things like death threats or misogynistic insults, I don't support that, and I've called it out in the past. Like when the leftist streamer Vosh, drama alert, who is not trans.
Then why is he your example, given you introduced this topic by pointing out that trans people can sometimes take things too far?
Tweeted at J.K. Rowling, "Women be quieter and start apologizing" challenge.
Okay, 2 issues. First off, Vosh didn't actually tweet this at Rowling, as seen by the fact that he didn't at her in the tweets in question. But second off, I just want to talk about how fucking tasteless this is. You see, Contra is bringing this up to make the point that she does actually fight against bigoted sentiments in the movement for transgender rights, which she directly says right after this part.
The point I'm trying to make is, I have no qualms about calling out people on my side whenever they go too far or cross a line, or do stupid tweets and then mansplain to me about how I don't understand tactical misogyny. Idiot. But the same cannot be said of J.K. Rowling.
She contrasts this with Rowling, who does not call out such sentiments when they show up in her movement, with her example being Dennis Kavanaugh.
Dennis has also tweeted that he preferred AIDS to the trans movement. And also, quote, I will fucking nail you to a wall what you have done to these innocent children. Your mutilation of these little humans because they were gay will be nothing compared to what I to what I will do to you legally. You think you are ghouls? Wait till I deal with you, bastard, and I mean to. Dennis? It's time to log off, Gorge. I do wonder, does Dennis threatening to nail people to a wall count as illiberal methods? I guess J.K. Rowling doesn't think so because she's never condemned it. In fact, when Dennis's Twitter suspension ended, she was right there to welcome him back. And she continues to retweet him.
And I guess what I'm saying is I find it distasteful to go from talking about the extremes in one movement, aka a guy who said he preferred the AIDS epidemic, which killed 100,000 people from 1981 to 1990 alone, just in the United States, by the way, the transgender rights, and threatened to nail supporters of transgender rights against a fucking wall before segueing into hateful rhetoric in your own movement, with your example being a lightly misogynistic joke on Twitter, which, even if you don't find funny, hell, I don't even find it particularly funny, isn't comparable to the things Dennis Kavanaugh did. Structuring the video like this implies an equivalence that just doesn't exist. I'm sorry. And even though I'm far from under the impression that this was intentional, it at the very least feels like this wasn't thought through well enough.
I called him out, tweeting, doing edgy ironic misogyny while defending trans people magnifies the grain of truth in what TERFs say about there being misogyny in trans activism.
You know what else magnifies that claim? Saying there's a grain of truth to it, you idiot. Furthermore, I want to talk about the wording of that tweet, how it magnifies the grain of truth. Because the problem with that is when TERFs discuss misogyny in the trans movement, they're talking about trans people existing. It's funny this video is about J.K. Rowling, given she called right now the most misogynistic period I've ever experienced, despite being 10 when her home country of the United Kingdom first allowed women to open bank accounts in their own names, and 27 when it became illegal for men to rape their wives. Fuck, one of the reasons why she used the pen name J.K. Rowling as opposed to her real first name of Joanne on the Harry Potter books was because her publisher assumed young boys wouldn't buy a book written by a woman. They're saying this because of gender theory and transgender people existing. And they're going to say the same things for the same reasons, regardless of if Vosh makes a joke on Twitter or something. I know I'm harping on this, but I just find the framing to be so fucking weird. And it's hard for me to not think about the framing, given Contra specifically said her viewers should understand framing earlier in the video.
Now, because you, viewers, are smart, media-literate people, you understand framing.
When I first heard this point, honestly, the first thing that came to mind was the scene in Back to the Future 3 where Marty was being intimidated by Mad Dog Tannen, and he just says, in reference to why he doesn't really care about said intimidation,
he's an asshole. I don't care what Tannen says. And I don't care what anybody else says either.
TERFs are assholes, and we should not care about what they say, is my point.
I tweeted that because I recognize that if people who are claiming to speak for you are doing so in a misogynistic way, and if you let that slide, you're going to wake up one day to find that you're in a misogynistic movement. Of course, Vosh took the criticism really well, explaining that actually, I just didn't understand the complex tactical arguments for the moral necessity of being misogynistic to J.K. Rowling.
I assume you're referring to the top tweet when you say this, which wasn't in reference to the joke tweet itself. Vosh was saying this in response to you asking him why he was getting defensive in response to criticism from Cat Black, with him essentially saying that if you knew the entire situation, you would understand why he does not view this criticism as reasonable. This was because the tweet you were replying to, which started this discussion, was him making fun of a Twitter thread that Cat Black had posted on him, by saying you felt like he dismissed Cat Black's criticism of him when it sounded reasonable to you. He wasn't even saying you had to agree with him, just that there was a reason behind him dismissing Cat Black specifically, which he thought you didn't realize.
And then he accused me of cancel culturing him, while at the same time literally telling his followers to publicly shame me.
The more viewer in the replies being like, that's not what's happening right here. Like, this is necessary, okay? Publicly shame her into changing her mind on that.
Then bringing up my past struggle with addiction.
Move you off this site and into... I don't want to bring up the substance abuse.
He specifically said he wasn't bringing it up. I don't get the issue here. Especially given Vosh was going to make the point that you are currently, in his mind at least, engaging in behavior that not only have you previously denounced, but you have actively said is harmful to your mental health, when others engaged in it in response to actions you did. Vosh's actual response tweet did contain this sentiment, however, did not make it as overt as he was originally considering, because he felt doing so would be needlessly harsh and just in bad taste. You don't have to think it's a good point. Fuck, you can think it's incredibly tasteless. And Vosh agreed. That's why, after beginning to type this point out, he backspaced and reworded it to make it more tactful.
So that pretty much confirmed to me that Vosh doesn't actually care about advocating for trans people and just uses trans rights as a pretext to act like a fucking dingus. I won't tell you to publicly shame him though, because unlike Vosh, I would never sink to that.
You say after quite literally publicly shaming him for his previous actions. I assume that's why you brought it up, at least, given you specifically used it as an example of bad behavior, or behavior that you view as shameful. I should note that when I showed this video to my friend Hester before making it public, she made the point that Contra more than likely meant that her fans shouldn't publicly shame him. However, even ignoring the fact that it just doesn't make any sense to publicly shame somebody before telling others not to do the same, that is quite literally the definition of hypocrisy. But this also begs the question once again of why this was even brought up in the first place. The entire reason Contra even brought up the drama with Vosh, I thought, was to make the point that people do publicly shame people who engage in bad behavior despite them being in favor of transgender rights. But now she's saying that actually her fan base shouldn't call out this behavior when it comes up. Whose point are you trying to make here exactly? Anyway, that's all I want to cover, so final thoughts. This video isn't terrible in the most literal sense, especially given everything I didn't cover is actually pretty decent. However, the bad stuff is so bad that I cannot honestly like the video, if that makes sense. The video comes off as more than a little confused, and her random decision to attack Vosh just felt out of pocket at best. Good night, and good luck. You know, I haven't watched CNN in about 2 years now. I swore off the network entirely after their coverage of Biden's Afghanistan withdrawal. However, WatchMojo did this video on the worst things CNN has ever done, and wow, it's bad. Mind you, the video as a whole isn't terrible. There were 2 entries that particularly got on my nerves, though. The first one being number 8, which I will play for you right now.
Number 8. Inspired the fake news craze.
I told you, CNN is fake news. Don't talk to me. Go ahead, please.
News that deliberately misinforms has been around as long as news itself. There's an important distinction between media bias and fabrication that has faded in discourse on American journalism. As CNN escalated negative coverage of President Donald Trump, they leaned on possible conspiracies between his 2016 campaign and Russian agents. The network's particular interest in the Steele dossier, dismissed by many outlets as unsubstantiated, undermined their credibility. Worse, it was early fodder for Trump publicly dismissing bad press as fake news.
CNN's fake news. I don't take questions. I don't take questions from CNN.
The political right wing has since popularized the age-old term to conflate critical mainstream media with disinformation. There are, of course, many conclusive points of criticism for Trump, but CNN's efforts to keep conspiracy theories in the public consciousness helped popularize a dangerous pejorative.
Fake news. CNN. Fake.
Okay, first off, I can't help but notice that WatchMojo changed its wording from saying CNN pushed possible conspiracy theories to just conspiracy theories over the course of a minute. I also find this framing to just be idiotic. You're blaming CNN, specifically their coverage of the Steele dossier, which, yes, was later disproven in several ways, I will gladly concede that, for Donald Trump and Republicans smearing critics of the administration as pushing fake news. So it's CNN's fault the rest of the media was smeared? But why wouldn't somebody who's willing to dishonestly smear the rest of the media not just do that anyway, regardless of what CNN was reporting? Also, blaming CNN for the Steele dossier coverage just feels weird given, well, it wasn't CNN's fault. They were fed misleading information about the dossier, specifically regarding if it had previously been fact-checked. None of this is even getting into the fact that CNN was still skeptical in its reporting regarding the document. I immediately recognized the person on the right of this footage CNN shows as veteran journalist Bob Woodward. So I looked up specifically CNN's coverage on the Steele dossier with Bob Woodward, and the first 2 videos I found were titled Woodward, Unverified Russia Dossier is Garbage, and Watergate Reporter, Russian Dossier is Garbage. So let me make sure I get this criticism straight. CNN reported on a major allegation against the then president-elect, which they were led to believe was backed up by factual information and originated among an intelligence agent, and they proceeded to neutrally cover it and allow critics of it on their network to discuss their issues. Republicans then used the fact that this dossier was later proven to be false as a scapegoat for dismissing all negative coverage of the Trump administration, and that's CNN's fault somehow? I was also incredibly frustrated with their number 3 entry, which was on CNN's groundbreaking coverage of the Gulf War. Just watch.
Number 3. Coverage of the Gulf War.
The skies over Baghdad have been illuminated.
The Gulf War was a controversial episode in American foreign policy. Unprecedented media access and the dawn of the 24-hour news cycle promised truly nuanced coverage of the conflict. Instead, CNN largely stuck to the perspective of the U.S. military. Even human interest stories concentrated more on American servicemen than locals facing unimaginable upheaval.
I'd like to tell the American people how much we appreciate your support, your prayers, and your confidence during these last 7 months.
Viewers saw more action and coverage of violent anti-war protests in the States. By the end of the brief war, CNN and its groundbreaking format were a revolutionary success. Still, many accuse the network of propaganda and sensationalism, with this watershed moment in journalism sparking the CNN effect, wherein news media plays a key factor in policymaking. There's no overstating the consequences of CNN's breakout, importance, or dire.
The whole world was watching CNN. We were the only ones who had reporters in Baghdad.
You know, I was originally going to go into this long rant about how they don't actually say who these critics are that felt this way, but instead I'll just point this out. Their third worst thing CNN has ever done is reporting that they themselves called groundbreaking and revolutionary, but which they also claim was bias in favor of the US. And their best example is human interest stories focusing more on Americans, which, by the way, that would more just be the result of the fact that their targeted demographic is Americans than Iraqi civilians. And even if you think that's an issue, that still isn't third worst thing a network has ever done worthy. Good night and good luck.
Imagine two men living together. They love each other very much and are committed to being there for each other come what may. Should the government regulate their bond through marriage law? Well, it turns out the two men are brothers who both never married and enjoyed sharing a life, including for the material benefits of splitting rent, supplies, and so on. But their emotional connection and desire for sharing a home don't make them married.
I mean, yeah, I guess you're not wrong, given marriage is a legal status granted to two people by the government, but nobody would argue otherwise.
Also, isn't marriage like a union, like a consensual union between two people, no matter what?
Well, fair is fair, and the two people listed here would not be allowed to get married to each other in the US because that would be an incestuous relationship. Which raises the question of what the point of a marriage between these two hypothetical people would even be. Remember, legally speaking, marriage is seen essentially as a voluntary entrance into the family of another. So, what the fuck would be the point of doing that when you are already part of the same family in the first place?
This brings up a foundational question. Why does the government even bother regulating marriage? It does so because marriage is different.
Different than what? That's not a complete sentence on its own.
This is a fragment of a sentence, Kyle. Wrong name, Sheriff Gregus.
It's not just an emotional connection. It's a total union, heart, mind, and body, that naturally unfolds into the total sharing of family life, and so demands an equally total commitment.
How do you quantify a commitment?
The bodily union that seals marital love also makes new life.
You know what that would also include? Gay couples. Because they give out many ways for gay couples to give birth. Adoption, co-parenting, IUI, semination, IVF, egg donation, surrogacy, seahorse death, the list goes on. Saying, oh, gay couples can't make babies is ignoring the fact that they can give birth and live happy lives.
Also, this ignores the various infertile people who have marriages. A woman who undergoes menopause doesn't have her marriage dissolve, now does she? Nor are you forced to prove you have a high sperm count before you can get a marriage license.
New life that is vulnerable and needs to be taught everything. How to walk, how to be kind, how to care for itself and others. So marriage is naturally fulfilled by having kids and by raising them.
Legally speaking, what you just said amounts to utter gibberish.
What about the people who don't want to have kids? These points you are making are not the slay moment you think of making.
Furthermore, what does it mean to naturally fulfill an artificial and legally created institution? We don't have marriages in nature. People weren't getting married when they were cavemen like this is History of the World Part 1.
In the year 1 million BC, it is thought the first Homo sapien marriage occurred. It was shortly followed by the first homosexual marriage.
Therefore, it doesn't make any sense to say that you could naturally fulfill marriage. It's like saying you could naturally fulfill the purpose of an artificial sweetener or habeas corpus.
Didn't the caveman buck before marriage? Didn't they do the nasty before marriage was even a thing?
I mean, given that cavemen had children, I'd assume so. Said children, by the way, were typically raised by family, friends, and other members of the community just as much as they were the actual biological parents.
Hence the state's interest in marriage. Children, the single greatest public good,
never say that again,
can come only from a man and a woman. Kids who know the stable love of the two people who gave them life will have the best shot at becoming thriving adults themselves.
That is wrong. That is wrong. That is 100% wrong. Ah!
Anyway, while my co-op partner is screaming in the background, I'll just point this out. There's not actually any evidence of this, and in fact, multiple studies have found that there's no evidence of this, and in fact, multiple studies have found that children raised by same-sex couples do exactly as well, if not slightly better, than the parents of opposite-sex couples.
Okay, sorry. Just if you only think that being straight is the only way to be a good parent, maybe just don't become a parent at all. Please, for the love of Lord Jesus of gay.
Which affects every other social good. No wonder it's historically been quite the ceremony to get married and quite the mess to undo it.
So that's a generalization that has absolutely no truth to it. There have been so many cultures, many of which with their own unique views of marriage, attempting to make a statement like that just doesn't make any sense. Hell, some cultures don't even have an understanding of marriage, such as the Meso culture in South China, which has existed for 2,000 years. Many cultures have also had a rather lax view of both marriage and divorce. One of them being the United States before the American Revolution, by the way.
Early on, the LGBT movement's goal was touted as modest. Marriage would remain two people, committed, sexually exclusive, but would change to be open to same-sex couples as well. So what's the big deal? Well, redefining marriage doesn't just change who gets to marry. It changes what we think marriage is.
Wow, changing things changes them. I never would have thought of that otherwise.
Guys, look at them go. Look at them changing the definition of marriage. Woo!
It teaches us that what makes a marriage is emotional union. That marriage has no inherent link to kids. That moms and dads are replaceable, and that it's bigotry to think otherwise.
So, question, if same-sex marriage redefined marriage so it was unrelated to childbearing, which is an ahistorical claim as mentioned above because several cultures have viewed it as unrelated to childbearing, why would allowing it have any effect on how people view the raising of children?
Something to add. You don't have to get married. It is an option. We aren't outlawing straight marriages. Let me just give you an oranges and apples situation. Okay, so I'm eating a whole leaf, and there's another person who is also eating a whole leaf. I have a problem with it, even though it has nothing to do with me, nor with anything that person is doing. You know what I do? Do I ignore them? No, I take their rights away, because they ate a whole leaf and they copied me, even though I didn't think that is even possible. But anyway, see how dumb this is? See how illogical and stupid your point is?
A boy and girl who grow up absorbing these ideas from law and culture will feel less need to marry before having children, or to stay together for life, rather than for as long as that emotional connection lasts.
Again, and I cannot stress this enough, your argument is literally contradictory. If this really redefined marriage away from raising children, why would same-sex marriage in any way relate to how children are raised? You're just putting in different things you don't like under one umbrella as if they're all connected, even though one of your arguments is that one of these things is disconnecting the other.
or to stick with it so their kids have mom and dad under one roof. Relying on the emotional union view of marriage makes it harder to reverse the harms of no-fault divorce, which has led to broken homes.
Okay, here's another issue I have. I understand this is a socially conservative Catholic YouTube channel, so obviously I'm not expecting them to break down on a microscopic level why they believe what they do, but more often than not, I can't help but think, okay, why is that a bad thing? Why was no-fault divorce a bad idea? You say it has led to broken homes, but you don't elaborate on what that even means. The video doesn't say why the presenter holds these social beliefs. It just assumes the audience agrees with them, as if there's a single person in all of existence who's pro same-sex marriage but against no-fault divorce.
How can we fight fatherlessness and affirm that fathers are essential if we've redefined marriage to make fathers optional?
No, we've made husbands optional and defined marriage away from child rearing according to your own fucking video.
We need to return to the only vision of marriage that reinforces rather than erodes the stabilizing norms of marriage, the bedrock of every society for thousands of years.
So, doesn't that include children that have gay parents? Because, let me tell you, they exist. You are treating like gay parents don't even exist. And pretending that gay parents don't exist, it causes little discrimination.
Yeah, that's another thing that bothers me. They're treating this as some far-off hypothetical and not something that has been happening for decades at this point. Anyway, neither of us had any final thoughts, and there's nothing else in the video to cover, so good night and good luck. Before we begin, I just want to say that I know the person I'm covering has already disowned this video. However, it makes very common mistakes when well-meaning, intelligent, and usually fairly correct people talk about race. So I figured it's worth covering, if only to explain what the most frequent issues I see in mediocre videos about race are.
So, the 20 Shades of Land and shitty concrete are showing and I'm sick of it.
As we all know, the best audio has random explosions over it that make it near impossible to hear what the person is saying.
Racism towards white people.
I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but sadly, it doesn't exist. You know what you can't be? Oppressed. As a white person, and be an oppressor of many minorities. You are white! W-H-I-T-E.
Thank you for spelling that out for me. Also, how do you know that he's white? He hasn't said anything to that effect yet. All he said is racism towards white people so far, after all. And you don't show any evidence to back up this claim. Mind you, even if he was white, that wouldn't really matter because it wouldn't disprove anything he said. Furthermore, can I get your definition of racism, please? Because if we're simply defining it as prejudice based on race, or a belief that race is a fundamental determinant of human traits and capacities and that racial differences produce an inherent superiority of a particular race, you know, the top definition of racism the Merriam-Webster dictionary gives, then yes, you could be racist towards white people, given they are a race of people. Lastly, Ratsu's audio balancing in this video is fucking terrible. The person she's covering is far quieter than she is, so I'm going to be fixing that throughout the commentary, just so you all know.
It's become a trend recently on social media, especially on TikTok, to be racist to white people.
As you show absolutely no screenshots or evidence to prove your fucking point. Way to go, Shoddy!
How about you try giving him a second after he introduces the topic at hand? I went back and checked, and we are 9 seconds into his original video. Obviously, he hasn't had the time to show evidence for his claims yet.
This is a literal problem with the video.
I mean, if it were a metaphorical problem, that would be one thing.
A lot of people are not gonna like this video, but frankly, I don't really care because this is a problem that needs to be talked about. I've legit seen videos online of people being openly racist to white people and being proud of it. I remember I saw this one video a while back of a girl claiming that you need to ask your friends if your white friend could come and hang out because maybe they don't want to deal with the quote-unquote white energy, and that you don't want that person to feel like a good white person and feed into their ego. It's actually insane. But the question is, why do these people think it's okay or acceptable to be racist to white people? Maybe they've had some bad encounters with white people in the past and think it's because they're racist and that all white people are bad as a whole because of those few bad interactions. If this is one of the reasons, this reason just pretty much makes no sense.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe because our ancestors had enslaved black Africans, stole black cultures, profited off of it, put Jim Crow laws, hanged and beaten them near a tree, and had been beaten with police batons.
So, what he just said, they had bad encounters with white people and hate all white people as a result. You are literally just giving a more detailed version of his point. Also, what do you mean by our ancestors? Have you gone from knowing his skin color to knowing his lineage all of a sudden? For that matter, can you explain what you mean by stole black culture? I'm not even necessarily saying you're wrong on this, however, your lack of examples causes me to have no idea what the fuck you're even talking about. Speaking of examples you don't really explain properly, I want to talk about your mention of tying them to trees, which I assume was a reference to public hangings. Now, you aren't wrong when you say this did happen to black people in the United States. However, that was because public hangings were incredibly common in the United States at the time, as they were in most of the world. In spite of you, I assume, attempting to tie it into racism, given you brought it up as an example in a long list of things that began with you mentioning things like slavery and Jim Crow, which were racist institutions. Was there some racist way in which this was done? I mean, probably. However, your lack of explanation means that I have no idea if that's even what you're referring to or not. I should note that when I gave the video to Hester, she brought up the possibility that Ratsu was referring to lynchings. But if that's the case, then she should have said lynchings, given that lynching does actually have a racial connotation to it right off the bat, as opposed to tying them to a tree. It's the same issue with your reference of police batons. Are we talking what happened to Rodney King, or are we talking actual self-defense? I understand it's almost certainly the first one and not the second one. However, not everybody watching your video is going to know that. Fuck, not everybody watching your video is even going to know who Rodney King was. And you do so little to explain that, honestly, those who begin the video uninformed are going to finish the video uninformed.
Or I don't know, our ancestors also enslaved indigenous people, stole indigenous cultures, put them in Indian boarding schools, put Supreme Court wanting to take away ICWA, the act to keep indigenous children safe from being stolen and to be put in Indian boarding schools. And now, the Willow Project to do with, which is going to destroy the planet and the cultures around them.
So about halfway through, that just became incoherent gibberish. I think the last bit was in reference to the Standing Rock protest, which, by the way, was in 2016, and therefore not done by anybody's ancestors due to how recent it was. In the same regard, I think the bit about the Supreme Court is in reference to Holland v. Bracken, but that case is still pending at time of writing, as it was when you uploaded this video. Therefore, and I could not stress this enough, meaning it wasn't even done by anybody's ancestors, because it hasn't even been fucking done yet. Hey, remember how you got onto him for not showing evidence for his claims after he had been talking for less than 10 seconds? Well, now you're just not showing any evidence for the various claims you're making, so what the fuck?
Our ancestors also forced Asians to work in unsanitary workspaces, stole Asian cultures, put Japanese people in internment camps around America, also bombed Japan, and now have to deal with COVID-19 hate crimes because of communism.
So they have to deal with COVID-19 hate crimes because of communism, and that's why they hate white people? I don't get the connection, I gotta be honest with you. Regarding references to unsanitary work conditions, I think, and the key word here is I think, this is in reference to the Industrial Revolution. However, everybody had terrible working conditions during the Industrial Revolution. It was one of the defining features of the era. Furthermore, racists of their day weren't attempting to force Asians into these jobs, they were attempting to get Asians the fuck out of them. Hence why legislation like the Page Act was passed.
Because people have bad interactions with people of every race. Just because you had a bad interaction with someone of a different race doesn't mean they're racist.
We put them through discrimination and oppression, so again, that is a perfect reason for people of color to ignore us. Those reasons I mentioned earlier, yeah, because we put them through a bunch of shit that our ancestors did not have to do. They didn't need to do that extreme.
This is mostly the same as the last interjection, however, I decided to cut in just to point out that this guy's point was that not all negative experiences people of color have with white people are because of racism, and you giving examples of bad experiences that occurred because of racism doesn't dispute that.
That's like, for example, me getting cut in line at a grocery store by a person of color, and then blaming it on their race. It just makes no sense.
Lovely orange and apples comparison. However, quick question. Are those same races being racist towards white people in the room right now? Blank stare.
So you don't make any attempt to explain why the comparison is bad, instead you just sort of sit there and sarcastically quip at the guy. Also, I cannot help but notice how you keep going back and forth from saying that actually racism towards white people doesn't exist, and that racism against white people is totally justified.
Race car nowadays, but what they fail to realize is this isn't the 1800s anymore. Not every white person that you come across has ill intentions towards you, nor is every white person who you've had a bad interaction with been racist.
I don't want to be rude here, but aren't we forgetting that a shooting happened last year where a white nationalist went into a supermarket, recorded it live, and went on record shooting black people because they looked weird to him. Yet you ignored this as some gotcha moment. Like, I'm sorry? What?
Probably because it didn't have anything to do with his point, which was that not all white people are racist. He didn't say that no white person is racist, or that no interaction a person of color has with a white person that's negative is due to racism. He just said that it wasn't a universal trait. You pointing out examples of the opposite doesn't fucking disprove anything.
It reminds me of the George Floyd situation. A white cop kills a black man and the public goes into a rage, saying the police need to be defunded and that all cops are bad. Just because one police officer is bad doesn't make every police officer bad. Same goes for this. Just because there's some bad white people in the world doesn't mean every white person is bad.
What? They did not just compare saying white people are oppressed to George Floyd and police brutality. Did my ears hear that correctly?
Kind of. He was more comparing generalizing all white people as racist and bad to generalizing all cops as racist and bad in response to the death of George Floyd.
I am sorry. I am so sorry. What? The thing about George Floyd was he didn't do a crime. He was an innocent citizen who was stepped on by a policeman because he was a black.
No, he was arrested for counterfeiting a $20 bill, meaning he did do, in your word, crud. And for that matter, he was kneeled on, not stepped on.
Protests warred because of this incident. You compare a situation that has something to do with police brutality, and then compare you saying, I'm oppressed because I'm white. We really live in a small world, folks, because this man had said the most stupidest point I have heard in my life.
Really? So if it's so stupid, why can't you offer an actual response to it? Even granting that you understood both his point and the George Floyd situation, and by the way, you didn't, you still wouldn't actually be doing anything with this interjection besides repeating his point back to him in a slightly louder voice.
What in the white man is this? This is why we need to uphold white supremacy.
I'm just going to assume that was a slip of the tongue on your part.
Don't like white people. Another reason why some people may hate white people is because of their ancestral background with slavery. But here's a little history lesson for you real quick. White people aren't the only ones who owned slaves.
Girl, do not do it. Do not do this. For the love of gay Jesus, do not say black people were slave owners.
Oh man, I sure hope he doesn't do that very specific thing you just said he shouldn't do. It sure would be bad if that was exactly what happened next.
Black people actually owned slaves too.
God fucking damn it.
In fact, black people held their own black people as slaves. White people also held white people as slaves too.
I hate the world. Yes, they were, but that was all BC times. We're talking about 1800s, not those times, girl.
As was he, given there were black slave owners in the United States from, at the very least, 1654 until slavery's abolition. As for the claim that white people were enslaved in the United States, that one is misleading, but there is truth to it. Europeans were occasionally subject to what we'd currently call indentured servitude. However, indentured servitude is a more accurate term for the historical understanding of slavery than what we would modernly call slavery, which is primarily based upon chattel slavery specifically.
But we won't get into that because I'm not a history teacher, and frankly, I don't want to be.
Then why did you give us an inaccurate history lesson with no proof whatsoever while showing only gameplay?
As history teachers are known to do. Anyway, the rest of the video is just Bomber calling this guy a racist, so final thoughts. This is hands down the most Yakubian commentary I've ever fucking seen. Good night, and good luck.
The only thing I've ever groomed is my 2 Persian cats.
We did get something, a gift, after the election. A man down in Texas heard Pat on the radio mention the fact that our 2 youngsters would like to have a dog. And believe it or not, the day before we left on this campaign trip, we got a message from the Union Station in Baltimore saying they had a package for us. We went down to get it. You know what it was? It was a little Cocker Spaniel dog in a crate that he'd sent all the way from Texas. Black and white, spotted. And our little girl, Tricia, the 6-year-old, named it Check.
I just want to begin by saying I had no knowledge of this situation until last night as of recording, when a friend said I needed to see a video of a YouTuber apologizing or something, so I decided to check it out, and this is what I was greeted with.
It's been a while since you saw my face. I haven't been doing so great, so I took a little break. So a lot of people are saying some things about me that aren't quite true. Doesn't matter if it's true though, just as long as it's entertaining to you. Right? You guys having fun?
So, I'm watching a drama video through Ukulele. Truly Cochranian, that's all I have to say.
All aboard the toxic gossip train. You're chugging down the tracks of misinformation. The toxic gossip train. You got a one-way ticket to manipulation station. Toxic gossip train. Tie me to the tracks and harass me for my past. 'Cause rumors look like facts. If you don't mind the gaps, I won't survive in the crash, but hey, at least you're having fun.
And it was at this moment I immediately knew what kind of video I was in for. You know these kinds of videos, you've seen them hundreds of times by now. Somebody is criticized for doing something shitty, and they come on YouTube and admit to doing something shitty, but also spend a lot of time tut-tutting the people who called them out on it because I guess some of them hyperbolized it or something. It never makes any sense, and to be honest, I'm not entirely convinced it's supposed to. But at this point, I started to wonder, who exactly were the members of
the toxic gossip train?
An article in Vulture called The Controversy Around Colleen Ballinger, aka Miranda Sings, Explained, gave me a lot of context for this situation, and I thank them for that. To make a long story short, it turns out the members of
the toxic gossip train
were her own fans that based these claims off of things she objectively has done and said. I'm not going to go into everything regarding this video and the drama surrounding it because other people have already done such, but instead I want to focus on this tactic, because as mentioned earlier, it's a tactic I've seen tons of times that virtually nobody calls out for some reason. Notice how this video is framed. She's making this not because she screwed up and needs to address it, but because her hand has been forced by members of
the toxic gossip train.
The people who make baseless accusations against those they don't like with the sole intent of smearing their reputation.
Locomotives fueled with hateful accusations. The toxic gossip train. Steamroll over someone's reputation.
Never mind her refusing to give any examples of who these people are or evidence to back up her claim means she is making baseless accusations against her critics for the purposes of discrediting them and destroying their reputations. In the same regard, she goes after her critics because they, gasp, aren't perfect themselves. And therefore, I guess the implication is shouldn't criticize her?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that all of you are perfect, so please criticize me. Bring out the daggers made from your perfect past and stab me repeatedly in my bony little back.
But in this video, her entire point is that she's not perfect, and yet she is criticizing her critics by calling them all sorts of terrible things. It's the old trick that everybody does when they can't actually refute the criticisms about them. Instead of actually responding, they decide to, instead, just launch into baseless attacks against the character of the people doing the criticism. And yes, you are launching baseless attacks against me can in of itself be a baseless attack. The only difference being, of course, if you are the one launching that attack, you can portray yourself as a fighter against what you actually are at the end of the day. Good night and good luck. If you have not seen Susie's video on ShadowRuff yet, I would recommend doing so before going forward, although it is by no means required. You see, ShadowRuff did 2 videos on Emmo's World's commentary on TTC1, the second one being a remake of the first, along with an apology for the first video. And this is the video I want to zero in on for the rest of this commentary, fair warning. You see, according to ShadowRuff, he was just so gosh darn angry at Key's potshot at him at the end of his Sonic King commentary.
This clip make my rage frazzled. Frazzled until I wanted to kick his ass. This clip.
Before going on to express his frustration with Beryl, Tippy, and Sarah's tri-op on TTC2 because it defended Keyblade's potshot.
That was until U3. U3 had to commentate on that video and said, me commentary video on Liam equals harassment milking.
What type of excuse is that? What type of milking equals harassment? Where the heck does that even connect with that? Why? Why?
Of course, this should raise the question of, if his issue is with Keyblade, Sarah, Tippy, and Beryl, where does Emo fit into this? Especially given Emo wasn't even covering the TTC that Beryl, Tippy, and Sarah were. Sorry, do I sound a tad on the annoyed side? Well, that's because he begins the video by talking about his video on me last year.
But I also had one video I regretting, and that's Round's video.
Put together with the fact that these videos were commentaries on myself and Destroyer Shy, genuinely got me to wonder if he was trying to pin both of these videos on me in some way. Now looking back, I genuinely think that's a massive stretch and probably not what ShadowRuff was going for. However, I bluntly have no idea why he even brought up his video on me in the first place. But either way, I at the very least still decided to just ask him if that's what he was doing, knowing he would probably say no. Here's what he replied with. ShadowRuff, not in the mood for questions, just not in the mood. F, by the way, he spelled my name E-T-H, not E-P-H. But ShadowRuff, are you deaf? I said I not in mood for feeking questions, alright? Just leave me alone. Just leave me alone. Sad face emoji, sad face emoji, sad face emoji. Now, for the record, I could not find anywhere where ShadowRuff said he wasn't in the mood for questions. Also, I have to take note of him essentially attempting to paint me as the bad guy for asking for basic clarification, something which, I should note, I wasn't in the fucking mood for. One thing I can't help but notice is ShadowRuff seems to be incapable of just admitting that he's wrong. Now, I'm not saying he can't admit to making mistakes. That's not quite what I mean. What I mean is he can't just do that. He always feels the need to tack something on, something to make it the fault of some outside circumstance he just can't control. Why was his video on Emo bad? Because Keyblade made a pot shot at him and Beryl, Tippy, and Sarah defended it. When Neko Shadow said that Key didn't call him a harasser, he didn't just admit the mistake or even attempt to argue her point. Instead, what he decided to do was write a long, rambling paragraph blaming his autism. Or how about when Destroyer Shy called him out for misgendering Emo in his original video on her, and his response was to say, well, how was he supposed to know because Emo had a male voice? Fuck off! Although this is the same guy who randomly decided to speculate that I was transgender because of my long hair, because I don't fucking know. So what do I expect at this point? Toganium said you're either nitpicking or misunderstanding Emo's points. You reply with, but at least I try to tell her to not do it again as warning. Not do what exactly? Not do things that you will then misunderstand? And I could go on. He can never just admit defeat. There always has to be something more to the story. Even in his apology, he attempts to explain multiple flaws in his commentary by saying he was just under a lot of pressure at the time.
No, sorry. I shouldn't have unleashed my anger at you after all that pressure. Pressure?
Or his bizarre rambling about some promise he made.
I didn't do anything to him. I didn't break my promise.
It's just an all-around mess. And that's really the best word I can use to describe ShadowRuff's apology as well as his response to any criticism he's gotten so far. It's all just one giant mess as he desperately tries to find some way to not make him the one at fault and fails miserably each and every time. Good night and good luck. So I was doing research for a different commentary, and it involved me watching this old segment from Bill Maher from September of 2007, and it bugged the fuck out of me, and Bill Maher still says shit like this to this day. So I view it as fair game. I'm covering it.
And finally, new rule: if you believe you need to take all the pills the pharmaceutical industry says you do, then you're already on drugs. Yes, it's that time in the campaign where all the candidates are presenting their health care proposals. Hillary's covers children's teeth. Edwards has one that includes maintaining gorgeous shiny hair.
Damn, this really is old. This was back before mentioning John Edwards required you to use the phrase extramarital affair in the same sentence.
But none of the plans address the real problem. We won't stop being sick until we stop making ourselves sick. Because there is a point where even the most universal government health program can't help you. They can't outlaw unhealthy food or alcohol or cigarettes. Just pot, sadly.
Never mind, the US government did actually ban alcohol at one point, but I might just be nitpicking here.
Because, you see, the government isn't your nanny. They're your dealer. And they subsidize illness in America. They have to. There's too much money in it. You see, there's no money in healthy people.
Never mind that healthy people would actually be able to contribute to the economy, therefore giving the government an incentive to keep the population healthy. Fuck, a study from back in 1985 found that the total cost of illness in just the year 1980 on the US economy was $455 billion. Or about $1.6 trillion in 2022 dollars. Bill, if the government lacked any incentive to keep people healthy, why would it set up things like the FDA, which specifically exists to regulate products and make sure they are not, you know, unhealthy? For funsies?
And there's no money in dead people.
The funeral industry would beg to differ.
The money is in the middle. People who are alive, sort of, but with one or more chronic conditions that puts them in need of Celebrex or Nasonex or Valtrex or Lunesta. 50 years ago, children didn't even get type 2 diabetes. Now, it's an emerging epidemic, as are a long list of ailments which used to be rare and have now been mainstreamed. Things like asthma and autism and acid reflux and arthritis, allergies, adult acne, attention deficit disorder. And that's just the A's.
Wait, isn't this rant supposed to be about how corporations are making money off of treatment for illnesses? What treatments for autism do you think exist that they are making money off of? Is the real money in autism pills I've just never heard of?
Anybody wonder why we live with all this illness? I'll tell you why. At the LA County Fair last week, they were serving something called fried Coke. Now, my first thought was, gosh, what a waste of a perfectly good 8-ball. But no, they actually pour the Coca-Cola syrup into a deep fryer.
Oh, my God.
Then put it in a cup and top it with sugar and whipped cream and a cherry because, you know, fruit is good for you.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why people have asthma and autism? Because they had a fried Coke at a county fair in 2007. It almost makes too much sense. I don't even know how to respond to this. It's so fucking self-evidently stupid. Yes, Bill, all of our diseases are linked to the fact that you, at a county fair, a place known for rather strange forms of junk food, like, what were you expecting to find at a county fair, Bill? Did 50 years ago they serve salads? I could be wrong, I haven't checked, but I highly fucking doubt it for some reason.
In Hillary Clinton's health plan, the words nutrition and exercise appear once. The word drugs, 14 times. Just as the pharmaceutical companies wanted.
What would a universal healthcare plan that covers diet and exercise even look like? Is the government going to provide everybody gym memberships under that system?
You know, their ad weasels love to say, when diet and exercise fail. Well, diet and exercise don't fail.
Can we get a little bit more context as to what these ads are for? I mean, I assume medication, but for what illnesses? And furthermore, what diets and what exercise? You can't sit-ups the autism away, Bill.
A fact brought home last week by a new Duke University study that showed exercise, yes, exercise, is just as effective a cure for depression as Paxil and Zoloft.
I mean, I'd assume all three of those things are equally effective as cures for depression. Given depression can't be cured, that's not how depression works. Do you mean as a treatment for depression? Bill, you can't even get the basic fucking terminology of what you're discussing right. I'm losing my fucking mind here. With that said, I did look up the study, and here is a quote from it that Bill, I guess, didn't read. It also should be emphasized that the intent of our study was not to determine if exercise is superior to sertraline. Did you even read this study, Bill?
You know, if Republicans can sell the idea of preemptive war, Democrats have to at least get us interested in the idea of preventive medicine.
I know some of my audience is too young to remember, but there was no preventive medicine in 2007. Seriously, if you asked for a mammogram, they would have looked at you like you said Donald Trump was going to be president.
Someone has to stand up and say that the answer isn't another pill. The answer is spinach.
Because when I think of the picture of health, I think of Popeye the Sailor Man.
Okay, not spinach. Turns out that crap will kill you, but you know what I mean.
I think that says everything that needs to be said about this rant. Good night and good luck.
Okay, before we begin, I would just like to say that Tony Sonic will not be planning to tackle any of the Pokemon games or even Charge 5's videos anytime soon. So he gave me permission to do them for him. So I'm not really sure if anything is gonna work out well, and I also don't think that Bendy and the Ink Machine remake won't be out early of January 2023 because there's a lot of life problems with me right now, and there's just so much things that I have to tackle on right now because, you know, life stuff and things, video ideas and all that stuff. But yeah, that's just my point.
So, you're taking the same approach as Tony Sonic. I'd be annoyed, but that's the least of this video's problems, believe it or not.
Also, is it just me, or do his visuals remind anyone else of what you'd get if you put a CD into a DVD player? I should also note that ZachGoesRed here loves to talk as slowly as possible, and both pauses and stumbles over his words constantly, making this one of the most annoying videos I have ever had the displeasure of covering. Zach, I beg you, edit your audio and do retakes. Trust me, it will help. Regarding your disclaimer, first off, I see you still haven't learned how to spell Shari 5 in the time between my last commentary on you and now. Shari has 2 R's in it, not 1. This is a mistake repeated throughout the entire video, by the way, which leads to some especially humorous moments when we see him counting Shari 5s with 1 R sins on top of the screen, despite seeing Shari with 2 R's name on the screen at the same point of the video. For that matter, I have no idea what a controversy is, although I assume it's related to the concept of a controversy. Oh, also, sentences end with periods, not ellipses, and if that is supposed to be an ellipses, you're supposed to put a space between each period. Also, the sentence structure here is just horrible. There should be either a comma or a period after the word content, and the "and" should be cut, with "I don't want to start any controversy" being its own sentence. Also, it should be "with this video," not "for this video."
F-.
yes, my favorite video. Everything wrong with Pokemon Generation 1. Feet RoboZach, Shari 5, you.
Oh no. He's using the robot voice. And considering the fact what happened in my first commentary video, that's already alarm for concern. I understand this is a collab video, and I know I'm not want to talk because I did it myself, but A, that was my first video, so I at least have an excuse for that, whereas you've used your normal voice. And B, you don't actually do anything to distinguish yourself between the two characters, which is even worse.
Also, fuck that music is loud. Like, way louder than anything we've heard up until this point.
What move that Nidorino thinks it's doing, it most likely isn't going to affect Gengar, considering it's a ghost type that isn't affected by physical attacks.
It's probably using a move, I don't know, maybe called Bite?
Thank you for putting the name of the move on screen for no reason.
It turns out Charlie is right, because the dark type moves, or even dark type itself, weren't even included in this generation, but was included in other generations. So, leave Chari with no sin.
While you do acknowledge that he's right, I just want to point out that you wasted essentially a minute explaining this, that it should have been left out of the script entirely. Now, if you wanted to actually point out a real sin, Charlie was actually wrong about the fact that ghosts can't be harmed by physical moves. Technically, they can be harmed by physical moves, they can't be harmed by normal or fighting type moves.
That's Nidorino's cry, not Nidorino's.
Hey look, who cares?
But nitpicks are automatically bad, oh no!
Ignoring the fact you blatantly stole his bid from Tony Sonic.
Look, it's bounced the level!
Hey look, who cares?
Ephraim, you want to explain this?
Gladly. It doesn't matter if nobody cares, it's still something wrong with the game, and therefore something that should be pointed out in a video that goes over everything wrong with it. If you think nitpicking is an issue, that's a problem with the format, not Shari specifically.
For some people, Pokemon are pets. Others use them for fights. Myself, I study Pokemon as a profession.
You know, I've never thought about this, but how do the professors make any money? Are they funded by an institution to study Pokemon? They can't be self-employed, they don't have customers or clients, so how are they able to fund their profession?
Like you said, they were paid by an institution to study Pokemon.
No. He asked who was funding them. And even disregarding that, you don't show any evidence to back this claim up. Now, granted, neither does he, but I trust Charlie far more than I trust you. And considering your other videos, yeah, I don't think I need to explain why that's the case.
Not only that, but Shari brought it up as one possibility while making a larger point about how it's not explained in game. You assume this hypothetical is true based on, best as I can tell, literally nothing.
This is my grandson. He's been your rival since you were a baby. What is his name again?
Bro, he's your grandson. I don't think the senile old man should be handing out elemental monsters to 10-year-olds.
The age of 10 is required to get these little monsters. Plus, even though the name is gameplay-wise, not story-wise.
Well, you are correct about the age. That wasn't even the real point of the sin. It was the fact his grandfather didn't remember his own grandson's name. Now, granted, game-wise, yes, it makes sense, but it's still a flaw in the game. And the anime barely follows its own rules most of the time, so using that as an argument doesn't exactly mesh well.
Also, I have no idea what the name is gameplay-wise, not story-wise, even means, and I'm too scared to make any attempt to figure it out.
This is some incredible technology to be able to store physical items in a digital datascape and recall them whenever you'd like. But how? Is it like stored on your own computer? You upload it to the cloud? How does the data get called to become physical mass again?
That item gets stored into a cloud and transformed back into a physical item. Even though it's not really true, it is shown in the anime lore.
Okay, one, you're using the movie, which didn't come out until much later.
2 years later, to be exact. Pokemon Generation 1 came out in 1996, while Pokemon the first movie came out in 1998.
Explain away something that wasn't in the game. 2, even if it came out at the same time, the game itself doesn't explain. And before you use the "it's old but limited" argument, it doesn't exactly disprove the point being made here. By that logic, nobody would be able to critique old games, and a lot of your own videos in that turn would be kind of rendered moot. And lastly, you literally acknowledged that it can't be true. So, which is it? It can't be true and untrue in the same line.
For that matter, where in the anime in the first movie is this shown? Are you going to show us the scenes? Are you going to at least tell us what these scenes are so we can find them ourselves without having to watch the entire anime or the first movie? As the presenter, you're supposed to be giving us any and all important details, which you failed to do in this interjection. And that's not even getting into the fact that the first movie has some inconsistencies from both the games and the franchise as a whole.
Also, there's this truly hilarious scene where Ash somehow manages to beat a golem with Pikachu.
How is this significant? Because electric attacks don't work against ground types. There's a reason the fan nickname for this beast is Godchew.
Fuck, while on the topic of the review I'm clipping, Cartoon Hero also makes note that psychic powers work completely different in the anime compared to the video games.
Oh, and I should point out that one thing between the games and the anime is radically different. In the Pokemon games, psychic powers are just another form of attack energy.
In the anime and in this movie, however, psychic powers are treated like more traditional psychic powers are. Telekinesis, psychic shields, mind blasts, that kind of thing.
Also, if the first movie is canon, then so are the Magic Pikachu tears, and I don't think I can mentally handle that.
Now watch it remind me of that scene. Even when I was a massive Pokemon fan, that was cringe.
Some things are best left forgotten.
There's a movie on TV. 4 boys are walking on railroad tracks. 1986's Stand By Me is a movie in the Pokemon universe? Why? Like, nothing against it, I'm just wondering if that means that other real-world movies exist in this world, too. Does Stephen King exist in this world? Does the song the movie gets its title from exist? What other real-world music exists in the Pokemon world? Was Post Malone canon to Pokemon? Wow, in 26 years of playing Pokemon and the almost 8 years of making these videos, never would I have thought I would utter the phrase was Post Malone canon to Pokemon.
Even though I kind of didn't absorb that information, I'm just gonna kind of say, yeah, maybe Stand By Me is playing on the TV. But Charlie makes 2 pop culture references that aren't sins of the game cliche. I don't even know why he even made the Post Malone one.
First off, ow, my fucking ears! Second, these are questions. And third, you don't even acknowledge the question and just say it's a pop culture reference, even though it's kinda how the format works.
Also, the sin is that Pokemon is needlessly referencing something from the real world, therefore creating questions about what from our world is real and what isn't. For that matter, he brought up Post Malone just as a random example of somebody from our world.
Right. All boys leave home someday. It said so on TV.
Really? It said so on TV. Well, the TV also told us that Beanie Babies were worth millions of dollars, that the internet was a fad, and that if I called 951-262-3062, I could talk to Santa. So maybe you shouldn't be getting parenting advice from Rob Reiner's Stand By Me, Mom.
Those 3 statements you made were real-life hoaxes, not the ones in the game. And plus, most people in the Pokemon world believe things on TV, but most of us in real life don't.
Using real-world logic and game logic in the same sentence. There's just so much wrong with that, I don't even know where to start. But to make it somewhat brief, so it's someone okay to just believe anything that's said because it's on TV, and because it's a video game. So let's say a kidnapper or even Team Rocket broadcasted something and she believed it. Would that mean she's in the right? Look, we're not even 5 minutes in and this video is giving me a migraine. Something not even Tony Sonic is able to achieve, which is surprising to say the least.
Okay, so I can understand the logic of the game here, especially for kids who are more willing to explore in games, but to my knowledge, there's not a single indication that I ever have to go to the Pokemart in Viridian City. Oak doesn't tell me to pick up a parcel for him, I just have to wander in there myself.
This game was made for kids to explore and try to find their own path. And plus, even in the Fire Red version, Oak tells you where to go, though. Yes, but this is literally the first game of the first generation, so kids would most likely play this one first. Meh, you're right.
As someone who's actually played a shit ton of RPGs, I can tell you for a fact that really doesn't excuse it. Yes, kids do explore. I'm not gonna deny that. But there still needs to be some sort of clear indication of where to go. Even bad RPG games still give you some form of direction as to where to go, because without that, kids can be confused and stuck. And let's remind ourselves, kids don't have the best attention spans.
I'm going to go one step farther than my co-op partner and say that kids don't love to explore, or at least their desire to explore is highly affected by how engaging the game is. If it really was as simple as kids love to explore and that therefore justifies not engaging in even the most basic, to use a term I stole from Egoraptor, conveyance.
The term used a lot for this concept is conveyance. And I think that's a fitting name. I mean, haven't you ever been playing a game and you're just like, what do I do? Where do I go? That's what I'm talking about. That's bad conveyance.
Then games like Mylon's Secret Castle and Super Pitfall would be classics on the NES, and not games most people only know about because of the AVGN.
Also, you acknowledge the fact Fire Red fixed this, but that has absolutely nothing to do with the first game, and barring that, what the hell makes you think this is the first Pokemon games kids play? Yes, I played it back then as a kid, and that was my first Pokemon game, but that doesn't mean every kid has, and even if that wasn't the case, that doesn't negate the point being confusing to some.
These back and forths are also just getting really fucking annoying. They aren't used to expand on points, they're just filler. I honestly thought I'd never find a worse self-co-op dynamic than Carmen Rider, but here we are. To be frank, at this point I'd find this dynamic better if the video suddenly stopped so one of you could laugh at the other saying Doodle Tone's tone.
Hey, but from Doodle Tone's tone... What's so funny? Doodle Tone's tone.
Okay, I guess I should go into a bit more detail regarding why this self-co-op is so bad and the mistake it makes that every other bad self-co-op makes. You see, when you aren't bouncing off actual people, the major thing you need to do is give me something that separates each of the characters involved. In my opinion, the best example of this is Doodle's first commentary on Joshua, where Doodle plays the role of the actual commentator, Hand is a salesman, and Cancer the Weeaboo has a broken microphone and talks about how much she loves anime while occasionally saying bluntly absurd things. Compare that to Zach and Zach with a voice filter on. What separates these two characters? Would anybody notice if I gave the dialogue to one to the other? Well, no, because there's just nothing there. I get not everyone can create fully fleshed out three-dimensional characters, especially on their first attempt, but come on, dude, you can do better than this. I just know it.
Gramps! What did you call me for? How did Oak manage to call Blue? Assuming Blue was going as fast as I was, and assuming he wasn't stopped by the old man in Viridian City, he would at least be in the middle of the Viridian Forest by now. Do we have phones? Did Oak send an aide? How did the aide catch up so quickly?
I'm guessing Blue might have took a shortcut to get to the lab. That either the aide ran to Blue while he was in Viridian Forest.
1, where's your proof? And 2, and probably the more important part here, there are only 2 ways back, and both of us have the ability to take it, right? Unless you're telling me there's a path we somehow couldn't take, and you don't show that. Also, we don't see them during that, so it makes even less sense.
Red, I hate to say it, but I don't need you. I know, I'll borrow a town map from my sis. I'll tell her not to lend you one, Red.
Damn, it feels so good to be a gangster.
You were saying?
Wow, okay. I'm gonna be generous and ignore the fact you're saying was clearly a joke and go into the fact that you're using a remake to explain sin and not the original game itself. I'd be more forgiving of this if it wasn't for the fact that you chose to twist context here, because what the hell?
Even then, this doesn't debunk Shari's point, as his sin was based around the fact that you could get the map in the first place. Like, what is this even trying to prove? What even is your point exactly? I haven't been this confused in a long fucking time.
I've had my coffee now and I feel great. Sure, you can go through. Are you in a hurry? I see you're using a Pokedex. Wait, how does the old man know what a Pokedex is? Didn't Professor Oak invent them? I figured that only my rival and I had them so we could fulfill Oak's request. Is the game implying that Pokedexes are available to the masses? Because if so, why is he asking us to undertake gathering data on every single Pokemon? We've literally just begun our Pokemon journey. Also, we're 10 years old!
Well, as it turns out through Professor Oak's dialogue, that Pokedexes actually were invented a long time ago, ever since he was 10 years old as well. So, yeah, Pokedexes have been around ever since almost the first time in Pokemon history.
I'm going to assume the source in question is Pokemon Arceus.
Which didn't come out until 26 years after Pokemon Red, by the way, meaning even giving you the benefit of the doubt that this does answer your question, Game Freak didn't answer this until slightly more than a quarter century after the game Shari is reviewing right now. And again, that's giving you, or, well, okay, more my co-op partner, but my point still stands, the benefit of the doubt in assuming that's true, given you don't tell us where you got this impression.
which I have yet to play, but even if that is the case, you don't present any proof of this, nor do you state where you got this information from. Yes, you're technically correct, but that also ignores the fact Oak is setting 2 kids, 10-year-old kids, might I add, to do something when there are plenty of adults in the world who can do it. Also, this is just a nitpick, but he's covering red, blue, and yellow. I only bring this up because you only list this as Pokemon Red when there's all 3.
Oh, Toro shit! You're telling me a level 5 Weedle at full health wouldn't break out of the Pokeball at least once? Also, why the hell do you have 50 fucking Pokeballs? In the Japanese version, you're a drunk who won't get out of the way until you've sobered up. Did you buy them all in a drunken stupor? And in the Western version, you're a petty asshole who blocks our way until you've had your morning coffee. I don't know which one's worse.
Well, according to research, it turns out some Pokemon with a lower level, even at full health, can sometimes be captured. And the Japanese version is worse because he's a drunk person that literally won't get up until he's softened up. So, yeah, but why is that a sin of the game, actually?
What research? Where did you get said research? I don't see it in the video, it's not in the description, it's not in the comment section, and considering the fact this is you we're talking about here, I refuse to take your word at face value. But even if I let that slide, you also have to realize Pokemon can break out, something you conveniently omitted from this conversation.
For the record, I found an algorithm from the website shinyhunter.club that tells you what chance you Pokemon under conditions. The chance of a level 5 Weedle with all of its health and no status effects being caught by a trainer with no Pokemon is roughly 44%. This means it is more likely than not that the Weedle would break out of its Pokeball under this situation. This was also the same result I got when I looked at the calculator created by DragonflyCave.com, which was specifically designed for Generation 1.
Also, was the whistling part really necessary?
Regarding the text, you seem to be under the impression that Shari is saying the fact the old man was drunk and not that he somehow managed to catch a Weedle that he shouldn't have been able to on his first try, or that he has 50 Pokeballs for no reason.
If you have the right stuff, go take on Brock!
Wait, where did he go? There's no way out from here.
He jumped over the fence.
No, he didn't. By that logic, you could also do that. You are where you could jump over ledges in this very game, right? Like, did you even bother to proof check this video beforehand? Then again, considering the rest of this video, I think I just answered my own question.
Have the right stuff, go take on Brock!
I'm not supposed to be able to do that.
Okay, what's with you explaining glitches? If a glitch occurs in gameplay normally, then it's a sin of the game. But if it doesn't, and if you're exploiting it yourself, then it's not a sin of the game. Again, why make this a sin of the game if you did it?
I don't know what it is with both you and Tony Sonic making this rule and why it's a problem, but again, if it can be performed, it's a glitch. By that logic, 06 is a masterpiece.
Rock launch! The issue at hand is that the glitch exists in the first place. Glitches are programming errors. By definition, that's just what glitches are. It doesn't matter if there's something you do on purpose, like going into subspace to get a second POW block.
There's that classic trick where you go in that little dark world, you pick one up, and wait for time to run out. And now, you have twice the POW.
Or if there's something that only happens because the game is acting weird, like platforms that are supposed to be, they're just not doing so.
Under normal circumstances, I should have been able to see the giant pieces that fly out from the robot's body and been able to use them as platforms. But the glitch gremlin was playing dirty that night. He knew I made it far, and that there was no continue code for this late in the game. This was my first time trying to beat Mega Man 5. So imagine my confusion when I kept getting struck by invisible objects. The platforms were invisible, but they appeared to be stationary on the robot. Just an illusion, graphical dummies meant to fool me and sabotage my entire night's effort.
Either way, they're all programming errors, therefore they are something wrong with the game.
So why are we fighting? I thought you just wanted to tell me about your favorite article of clothing.
He will after you battle.
Kinda weird to bring that the fuck out of nowhere.
Hi, this is the Ephrommentator in editing here to tell you all, man, I love having this hat on.
But moving away from that, as explained in the next sentence, it doesn't answer why he's fighting him. There are plenty of NPCs who don't fight and just talk about things too, so it's kinda just jarring to fight over this.
Hey, stop! I found these fossils! They're They're both mine!
You can have both of them if you want. I was just passing through. I didn't ask for this.
You know what they say in Pokemon.
You know what they say, the more the merrier. You know what they say, the more the merrier. You know what they say.
If you ever cross eyes with another person, you gotta battle. And plus, even though, yeah, you didn't really ask for it, it is mandatory.
You are aware consent is a thing, right? And even barring that, the dude just assumed something and forced him into a fight with no say in the matter.
Hey, guess what? I went to Bill's and got him to show me his rare Pokemon. That added a lot of pages to my Pokedex. After all, Bill's world famous as a Pokemaniac. He invented the Pokemon storage system on PC. Since you're using his system, go thank him.
Bro, I have one Pokemon. What the fuck are you talking about? Seriously, no one tells you about the PC and how it works unless you talk to the optional NPCs, and by itself, that's fine, but if you're just going through the story, not catching many Pokemon, this comes out of nowhere.
I mean, the game is still encouraging kids to explore, but even though it's actually kind of story-wise in the game and not really in the anime, but basically, if you actually catch 6 Pokemon, and if you catch like a 7th one, it will get stored into a PC that the game will notify you about. But you won't really know until you at least talk to the NPCs in the Pokemon Center.
So, I guess solo runs just don't exist. Sorry, my dry bread, J-Rose, but apparently you've been playing the game wrong the entire time.
Never mind how part of the appeal of Pokemon is supposed to be that there's no wrong way to play, hence why you can beat the game with a series of diverse teams and moves.
But no, seriousness, not everyone's gonna play like this. Yes, it's incentivized to do so, but it's not mandatory. Plus, again, it's never really stated until it happens, and at this point in the game, it's very possible, so it does kind of come out of nowhere.
For that matter, the issue Shari has is that the rival, and therefore the game, just assumes you have caught 7 or more Pokemon by this point, even though that's not actually the case, at least in his case. You pointing out that this is discouraged by the game, or that this is usually not the case, would not change that point, because Shari's issue is that this is something the game just assumes regardless of if it's true or not. And yes, you can make it to this point in the game without having caught 7 or more Pokemon. To speak personally, I used to play the game by catching new Pokemon once all on my current team evolved at least once. This meant that I would tend to only have 3 or 4 Pokemon by this point, as opposed to a full team.
Bill's first version of the storage system sucks, because if you fill up a box, which because there's no visual indicator is really hard to tell, you can't catch any more Pokemon, which isn't a huge deal unless you're talking about Safari Zone Pokemon or the legendaries.
Oh, come on, it's not that bad. You basically have enough boxes to almost fill the entire PC. It's not that short.
Okay, I looked it up, and you have over 240 spaces, which, yeah, I learned something new today. But the real problem is if you want to catch every Pokemon, ignoring the fact that's impossible by without trading and such, you have to change your box at the minimum 8 times, and that's being generous. This was fixed later on, but it's still a problem with this game in particular.
And again, that doesn't make it any less annoying to suddenly run out of space in one box and need to run to the nearest Pokemon Center to change what box your Pokemon will be sent to. Something that has happened to me multiple times while playing through the game, by the way. I have a vague memory of this happening to me in a cave, and I know for a fact it has happened to me in the Safari Zone. You know, the area Shari mentioned earlier, where the entire goal is just to catch Pokemon?
With your ability, you could become a top leader in Team Rocket. Buddy, I'm 10. You really think that putting a 10-year-old in possession of a fire-breathing lizard in any sort of position of power for a crime syndicate is a good idea? I wouldn't do that even if they didn't have the fire-breathing lizard.
He probably means when you're an old age. No, I get you might need an ID when you're 16 in order to get a job, but he probably means that at an old age.
You say that, but you realize this is a series where you can catch legendary Pokemon and basically do anything you want, right? And considering the police in this game, yeah, I'm still surprised there isn't more crime, if I'm gonna be honest with you.
I'm sure most of you know this one. In Gen 1, we had what's commonly referred to as Smart AI, where our opponent will always, without fail, use a move with a type advantage. Charmeleon is a fire type, so he's weak to water. And while that can, for the most part, be a pain in the ass, the only water type move the Shelter knows is Withdraw, which can't hurt me. It doesn't matter that it knows other moves that can hurt me. It doesn't even matter that Shelter's defense stat can literally go no higher because of how many times it's already used Withdraw. It will always prioritize the move it thinks will be super effective.
Because Withdraw is a water type move, so of course it would be super effective, even though it doesn't really do damage.
Actually, said water-type move does not do super effective damage because it doesn't do damage at all, which is Shari's entire point.
I haven't seen a video miss the point so fucking hard since... I want to say Tony Sonic's SA1 video, which is concerning. You literally acknowledge he was right, and even understand using withdrawal is a useless move after a set time. I'd be willing to let a lot of padding slide, but this one is the most egregious example because of how stupid this point is. I want to remind y'all, this video is 35 minutes long, with slow talking and missing the point multiple times. I swear, if I counted all the stories out and took away all the stupid points, this video wouldn't be 10 minutes, and that's still giving you the benefit of the doubt.
Oh, seriously, I'm really not supposed to be able to do this. Why is this so easy?
What? Like, what in goodness? I'm not gonna yell that. I'm not gonna yell. Just 10 cents. 10 cents, you pity motherfucker.
And yet, you only give him 1 cent.
I'm not even sure what Zach is going for here. So, the first time Shari uses a glitch, he gets 1 sin, same with the second, which we cut out. However, the third time, he gets 10 sins. In theory, at least. In practice, it's actually just only 1. Like, what's the point of that sudden jump? Was it what he did? So, skipping Brock and catching Mew is one thing, but getting a Pokemon to level 100 is an issue that's worthy of 10 sins. Something that would increase his sin count by roughly 50%, given we're only at slightly more than 20 sins.
I'm a cool guy. I've got a girlfriend.
Oh man, that makes you so cool. Please tell me more about it.
Sinning characterization.
What characterization? You literally never meet this dude outside this instance. And even ignoring that, you're sitting a joke. Like, is the concept of comedy just dead now? Do people just like to sin people just because, oh, I don't find this funny? This is a problem from Tony, and it's a problem from you. And I don't understand for life of me why that is.
Hiya, I'm a Pokemon. No, I'm not. Call me Bill. I'm a true blue Pokemaniac. Hey, what's with that skeptical look? I'm not joshing you. I screwed up an experiment and got combined with a Pokemon.
Okay, whoa, back up. Everything you said is completely believable given how bizarre this world is to begin with, but I feel like there's a missing element to this screw-up. You put the Pokemon in one of the teleporters, right? And then you stepped into the other teleporter, right? What was the experiment? What was the screw-up? Someone had to run the cell separation system the first time. Why do you need my help?
Remember Blue or Gary? Bill tried to do the experiment with him, maybe.
Okay, so what's stopping you from doing it again? No, seriously, I need an explanation, because you don't offer one, and when I looked up, the game doesn't either.
The Cascade Dodge makes all Pokemon up to level 30 obey.
Way ahead of you, Missy. My level 100 obeys me just fine.
Oh, no. You're not getting off scot-free. 10 sins.
I can do anything.
I mean, at least this time he actually did give Shari 10 sins.
I mean, A for effort, but is he even gonna bother explaining why it's a sin? No? Alright. But if I had to take a very wild guess here, it's because he's wrong about how the badges work, which would be a legitimate argument, if not for his Gen 2 video, where he literally acknowledged he was wrong about that.
See, this is something I didn't have a lot of experience with in Pokemon because as a kid, I didn't have anyone to trade with me. Remember in Gen 1 when I would get certain badges and the gym leaders would tell me that all Pokemon up to a certain level would obey me because I had said badge? Well, the reason they would bring that up is because of the obedience mechanic in the Pokemon games. If you raise your Pokemon past a certain level without the necessary badge, they wouldn't always listen to your commands, which makes sense. They didn't want players to trade in a high-level Pokemon and breeze through the game.
And I know you watched it because you made this video and plan on making his Gen 2 video as well.
Mind you, both of us believe that you still have the right to point it out as it is something wrong with the video, but you don't. You've gotten on to Shari for making valid criticisms that have been corrected multiple times now. For that matter, I want to point out that Shari's criticism isn't even inaccurate, as what he's essentially saying is that the game is overhyping how useful a badge that makes Pokemon obey into level 30 actually would be, given his level 100 Pokemon does not disobey.
I also want to point out that badge only applies to training Pokemon, not Pokemon in the wild, so... yeah, it makes even less sense than before.
Hey, I'll return the tea on my stove. Wait, you trashed that poor family's house for a technical machine?
It's Team Rocket. They will steal anything that they can get their hands on, or something that they just saw they thought is valuable.
And Shari is basically saying either that's a bad way to look at the world, that this technical machine is not important, or that trashing a house is putting more effort than is worthwhile for this object, regardless of how important it might be.
Personally, I would let someone pull that shit, but maybe I'm just built different.
Thank you. I feel much better.
You wanna see my cut technique?
I don't want to see any technique of yours after having just given you a rub, you disgusting old man. Also, you're the goddamn captain of a ship. Why did you get into sailing if you're prone to seasickness?
For the record, I did not edit anything there. Zach just goes silent for a good half a minute and then Shari has another sin. Did you even watch this video before uploading it? What the fuck happened here?
Originally, I ignored this because there were bigger problems, but yeah, even my worst video didn't mess up this badly, and I have shit editing. I couldn't even do this by accident if I tried. If I had known better, this was just pumped out for Christmas Day, and if so, that's a pretty shitty gift.
I was gonna have a part here where I didn't say anything, and that was the joke. But that joke was shit. So instead I'm saying this.
I chair the Pokemon fan club. I have collected over 100 Pokemon. I'm very fussy when it comes to Pokemon. So, did you come visit to hear about my Pokemon? Good, then listen up. My favorite Rapidash. It's cute, lovely, smart, plus amazing. You think so? Oh yes, stunning, kindly, love it. Hug it when sleeping, warm and cuddly, spectacular, ravishing.
Oh, this dude has definitely dreamed about f***ing his Rapidash if he hasn't already done it.
I mean, it's not wrong. Plus, most countries, even America, actually allow you to reproduce with animals if they are female. And even according to the Bulbapedia in the Sinnoh region, Pokemon and humans have actually proposed to each other in marriage, since they didn't really know how to reproduce.
Childhood ruin notwithstanding, that's still inappropriate for a kid's game, which is why Char sinned it. Or what? Would you rather him be for bestiality? I guarantee if you hadn't sinned it like this, you would have sinned him for being gross with a kid's game. There's just no winning with you.
Also, I promise you no country on Earth allows humans to reproduce with members of a different species, because species are quite literally defined by the ability of one member to reproduce with the members of that species.
I wrote the story.
Ah, so this is all your fault.
Yeah, and what's the sin? I get it. You're sinning the Pokemon games for having a kind of bad/mid story. But to be honest, the other stories are kind of good. Even though they're reused and remade, I honestly don't have a problem with them myself.
So, you're aware that he's joking, and yet you're gonna still sin him for that. Okay. And when did he say anything about any other game? You're talking about Gen 1 specifically, so I don't know where the hell you got that information.
Oh no! I dropped the lift key! I'm really glad I talked to that guy again after beating him, because why would you ever? I could have been stuck running around like a dumbass looking for the lift key.
Hey, what did I tell you of the first few parts of my sins? I told you this game will let you explore and try to talk to NPCs in order to find a way.
And like I said before, and I will continue to say until you get through your thick fucking skull, not a lot of NPCs have extra dialogue like this, but it's even worse here because at the very least early game, you can get away with that since it's very short and very quick. But here, it's pretty far in, you can easily forget where to go or what to do, since it's not made clear who has the goddamn key.
Also, I don't play many RPGs, so I could be wrong here, but I'm pretty sure that talking to the same NPC and expecting to get different text is not a common feature.
It varies from game to game, but in the older generations, it's very rare. If memory hasn't failed me, they stopped doing this around Gen 4, but I could be wrong on that.
Excuse me, wait up please! No pedestrians are allowed on Cycling Road! I'm not supposed to be able to do this.
Chaos! 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 Swiss roll! Ah, nom, 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 nom. Oh, this is delicious!
Because I'm rich, I can give you anything! What about my father back? Well, I'm waiting.
Sorry, Charlie, but life does not really work like that. Sometimes life can give you the W, but sometimes it will always give you the L.
Fucking god. Dude, you're reading way into this. I'd forgive this if you didn't let me sin him for joking. I understand this isn't really a sin of the game, but you seem to forget he's allowed to make jokes. This completely ignores the fact he's outright stated that these sins aren't meant to be taken seriously. If I had known any better, it feels like you're just doing this on purpose just to piss me off. And considering the fandom I'm covering, I would not be surprised if this was deliberate.
Also, sometimes it will always. Anyway, the next 10 minutes are a massive ramble about the Elite Four, which goes nowhere. Zach does not even sin Shari for anything said during it, so I'm just fucking cutting it out.
Which only supports my claims from earlier, by the way.
Still can't believe my dragons lost to you, Red. You are now the Pokemon League champion. Or you would have been, but you have one more challenge ahead. You have to face another trainer. His name is Blue. He beat the Elite Four before you. He is the real Pokemon League champion. Okay, wait, hold on. Doesn't that mean he would have had to fight a champion too? Were you the champion before Blue was? Well, that doesn't make any sense because that means there had to have been another member of the Elite Four, but you all have rooms that seem specifically designated to you all. Was there just not a champion before Blue got here?
It was actually Professor Oak. Think about it. In the game files, he's only the one trainer that you don't fight if you use hacks. And plus, he was considered in the email that he works for the Elite Four. So, yeah, he actually could be the Elite Four champion that he could have beat way before.
So, using hacks is okay, but glitches are the question. I can't with you. Ephraim, you want to tackle this? Because I have a headache, and I'm just done trying to explain this. If you excuse me for a moment, I need to go and rethink my life choices.
I'm just confused. I think what gets me about this point is that, once again, Zach is using outside sources to answer Shari's question. Here, it's something you could only possibly figure out through data mining the game, meaning this is something you'd have to go farther out of your way than normal to figure out. So Egamer responded to my video on him, and I'm going to be blunt, it's about as good as you'd expect a video which begins by openly speculating on if I'm trans to be.
At least I don't have a picture of a fucking anime girl in my background. What is this shit? Is this another tranny?
Two things. One, the avatar I use is not an anime girl. It's not even a girl, let alone one from an anime, so that's just wrong on both accounts. And two, I'm not transgender. I don't know where you got that idea. Honestly, the main thing I want to point out about this video is, despite its intention of, I assume, debunking me and making fun of me, Egamer actually agrees with me quite a lot throughout it. So you weren't talking about the quality of his videos, but you said he made bad videos.
Like, look at you.
You see, the thing I like most about this point is how he's essentially admitting he's wrong, but just attempts to excuse it by saying somebody else was wrong, and also, he was wrong in a way that doesn't actually matter.
Well, I mean, pretty much, yeah.
Again, you don't actually do anything to disprove what Creeper says.
Yes, because it's a nitpicky and geeky talking point.
You just go, well, joke's on you, I've arbitrarily decided it doesn't matter.
Like, look at you.
Well, I guess we all learned a valuable lesson today. If you are wrong about something, you should both say it doesn't matter, and then spend 1 dodecatillion words defending it.
Like, look at you.
I mean, in a way, Ephraim is right.
Of course, this is when he's not declaring that actually the video wasn't meant to be taken seriously and he just did it for attention.
It's a little side insult that I did for comedic relief, which was the main point of my video. You could tell from my video that I wasn't actually trying to make a good case against Communist Creeper. I was just A, trying to get attention, and B, trying to make a funny video where I just fucked with him. Once again, I would like to stress, I made the video for attention, and I got a lot of attention for it, so thank you very much. And I'm going to get even more attention by making this video. I like views. Views are pretty good. Like, when you just see the amount of people that watch your video, it's relevance, it's influence, it's great. So by responding to me, you're just showing me to people who either like me or don't. So what's that gonna do?
Because if you're doing something for attention, obviously you would loudly declare that, which would therefore make people less likely to give you attention. I'm just saying this seems like you're attempting to show yourself as so smart because you're out here playing 4D chess when you can't just admit you're bad at making arguments. And to end this video off, I'll discuss his argumentative skills. For a sample, remember how I said that he incorrectly said that Creeper's video on Matt Walsh was him calling Matt transphobic, when in actuality it was about asexuality? Well, here's how Egamer responded to that.
It's still LGBTQ. All this LGBTQ stuff is pretty much the same shit. Yes, I know there's small differences in it, but talking about asexuality and talking about transgenderism, my criticism of him using pointless buzzwords and just using the same leftist mainstream mumbo-jumbo still applies here. If you actually watch his video, it is essentially just calling him homophobic and just small gotcha moments where he uses buzzwords.
So you have nothing to substantiate your claim, and the best retort you can get essentially comes down to moving the goalpost. You said he calls people transphobic. You didn't say he talks about LGBT shit. Yeah, your arguments are still of the same quality, so I'm just fucking ending it here. Good night, and good luck. Oh, Nomis, did you really think you could get away with blatantly lying about things that happened in my server and I wouldn't notice? For those unaware, this story began when Mushroom Girl did a video on NomisYalf's commentary on her. In the comments of this video, Communist Creeper said the following: "That's the sus guy from Ephromm's server. For context, this guy sent porn in a Discord server and cried in my DMs after I muted him for 5 minutes and warned him." Now, this is in reference to something that happened in late April in my server. The Ephrommentator was here. You know, the one I have in the link in the description of my videos. Basically, Nomis came into my server under the name Flayer of Many. Later that day, he posted a picture of a guy's bare naked ass in a sexual pose, so Communist Creeper, who's a mod in my server, timed him out for 5 minutes. At which point the guy just fucking laughed. Nomis replied to that by saying, "Dude, that was Jab, lol." Jab was somebody else who joined my server at the same time Nomis did. Literally, down to the minute the same time. That's actually kinda funny. Who was banned for posting a gif of a guy fucking a turtle. In a server that not only has minors in it, but also one that has rules explicitly against NSFW content. I mention this to say that Nomis isn't wrong in this regard, given that Jabs did post this material, but so did he. So him saying this as if it debunks what Creeper says is just incorrect. Creeper replies with, "You shouldn't send porn in Discord servers with minors," and then a smiley face emoticon. And Nomis replies, "You seem awfully smug with that, almost like it's a lie or something, but who knows, right?" Smiley face emoticon. How the fuck do those two things correlate? You're smug, so you're lying? Even ignoring the fact that I just showed evidence that Creeper wasn't lying and that all Nomis has done so far is deflect, that wouldn't even make any sense if the conclusion were true. As if there's one tone everyone who's lying talks in, and it just so happens to be kind of smug. And Creeper responds with, "Here are at least 5 witnesses. Don't pretend to be innocent." I assume Creeper meant there and not here, but that's me nitpicking slightly. Anyway, Nomis then went on Twitter on the 5th and said the following. So Communist Creeper is basically trying to spread the idea that I posted porn in his server which has minors in it, but turns out he's legitimately just coping because I sent the Thug Shaker meme, a pretty, I'm not saying that word, but funny meme. How pathetic can you get that you cry about a meme? Okay, first off, it wasn't Creeper's server, it was my server. Second off, Thug Shaker is quite literally a meme based around posting pictures of guys who are naked. So Nomis is essentially attempting to defend himself by saying that Creeper was completely right to say what he did. Anyway, because Nomis has been claiming this is a lie, even though it verifiably isn't, his friends have been going after Creeper for the past couple of days. So I just wanted to make this quick video to explain why what Nomis is saying is a lie, and hope that a few of the people who believed him will change their minds. Good night, and good luck. Oh, for fuck's sake, Nomis! The same day I uploaded a video on Nomis and his accusations against Creeper, Nomis uploaded a video defending himself, and you can guess how good I found it to be. Although, what would I know? I am a barely known YouTuber.
In his server, or in this server owned by Ephromm, a barely known YouTuber.
I have to admit, I find it funny he can't seem to remember for sure if the server was mine or Creeper's, given it was quite literally called The Ephrommentator Was Here. However, how does Nomis attempt to debunk the audit logs? Well, very simply, he points out that technically other things could have occurred which would result result in the audit logs being the same.
It's literally just fake proof and audit logs. I could literally have joined the server, said hello, he could have deleted that message and then banned me, and that's the audit logs.
Which, first off, that situation would not be equivalent because you were never actually banned from Ephrommentator was here, but I'll grant that might just be me nitpicking. However, while I'll grant you that is at the very least possible for this picture specifically, not likely mind you, but at the very least within the realm of possibilities, that becomes notably less likely when we take this picture into account. Given said tweet shows the logs of you being timed out in my server with the reason being ass pick, not he said hello. But Nomis does attempt to defend himself against the actual accusations by pointing out it was basically like another meme anyway, so who cares?
Oh, it was a thug shaker, which by the way is this fucking gif. Which is basically what it was, but what I'm trying to say is, I didn't send porn to minors.
I just love that wording. It was basically that GIF. Well, there's a very small problem. It wasn't that GIF. First off, I recall what you posted being just a normal picture, not a GIF, but I could be remembering that wrong, so I'll ignore that. Instead, I'll focus on the fact that the picture you posted in my server was of a guy without any pants on showing his ass. You say this is basically what you posted. Well, okay, why don't you show us what you actually posted then? Not just an equivalence, post it or shut the fuck up. That is until later in the video at least, where the GIF goes from basically the image to the image itself.
But yes, nothing he's saying is true. I just posted one meme, which was this meme right here, this one right here, and now he's spreading allegations.
So is it an equivalence of the image, or is it the image itself? And by the way, this is the same guy who gets on the Creeper for going from saying that he and Jabs spammed lewd content in my server to saying that Jabs mostly did it.
But basically that I spammed it, only to after me challenge him with the proof that he himself spread, he instantly changes the story saying, actually it was just mostly the other guy. Yeah, nice one, retard.
Which, even ignoring the hypocrisy, isn't actually a contradiction. Two people can do something and one person can have a greater role in doing said thing than the other person. Hence why it would be accurate to say both that they did it and that one person mostly did it. With that said, if you do want to get onto him for just hypocrisy, may I recommend this clip.
He's just trying to manipulate the smallest detail with no proof simply because he wants to slander my name, which is quite pathetic. And guess what? The reason he hates me is because I left a comment on his channel saying his videos were garbage.
He goes from saying Creeper doesn't provide any evidence to back up his claims to making a claim about Creeper without showing any evidence. What was this comment? What did it say? Can you provide any proof it even fucking exists? Anyway, final thoughts. Just stop fucking lying, Nomis. It shouldn't be this hard. Good night, and good luck.